Sumana. I think one Mr. Srinivasan alone, I think, is yet to join. I'll check with him whether he said he's joining shortly. Other than that,
Okay,
I
why
think
don't you go ahead and check, then we'll start. You just go ahead and check with whoever's left. Also, has Mrs. Navneetam managed to join? Can you, why don't you just go ahead and check with them?
yeah, Navneetam is, I spoke to her. She's also joining shortly.
Okay, fine.
So Srinivasan has joined, I think. APS is Mr. Srinivasan.
Okay. So we can start.
Okay, fine. Let me just start off by saying that thank you everyone for taking this time and joining us today. I won't. Let's jump straight into it, and let me start by inviting CE to talk brief about the national campaign on buses that we are running along with the whole bunch of different groups. So let me hand over to Sanskriti and team to just briefly talk about that and set the context.
Thanks, Sumana. I'll request Avinash to please provide the context.
Hi, good morning. Thank you very much for this opportunity and taking this up in Chennai. So this campaign, Bus Lakh Ko Pachas, is really a campaign by Sumnet, and Sustainable Urban Mobility Network is a decade-old network which started looking at national urban transport policy and looking at how weak voice civil society has. And transport turns out to be set to be like a technical subject. But as yesterday, one of the panelists has said in Hyderabad, transport is more political than technical. And therefore, the decisions are taken on a very political front, and the technicalities are often forgotten. So it was very important to build civil society voice as well as understanding to really demand for more democratic spaces on the street, and that's what emerged the network called Sumnet. CE was initiator of the network and was helping setting it up and being secretariat for some period. Now Parisar, based out of Pune, is the secretariat of Sumnet, and it's also shared with Institute of Democracy in Delhi. We had been thinking about walking, cycling, intermediate public transport, and buses as a very important mode of transport which is used by general public, and therefore the whole idea was that we had been doing walkability studies, we had been doing, let's say, promotion of cycles, cycle lanes, even there was a bicycle rickshaw bill which was experimented in Bihar. So idea was that how do you really bring in more people's concern around mobility, and those kind of projects are demonstrated by some net partners through their locations. Now, bus has been in our mind for last decade, but we realized that they are not really in the talk of town. When we talk to decision makers or policy makers, they seem to believe that there is a belief within them that nobody's using buses. And that's what we felt, that it's very important to run a campaign which focuses exclusively on buses. So we are not saying that walking, cycling is important. IPT is very critical, but buses are very important. And if there are buses in the city, they are really need to be the part of the infrastructure of the city. And when we start looking at it as some net partners together, we realize that India as an urbanizing kind of country, and when we are hoping that slowly 50% of people will be staying in urban areas, out of 6,000 census towns in the country, only 198 or approximately 200 cities have some types of bus service running in them. We have maybe one or two exceptional cases like Bangalore or Mumbai, where proportion of buses per lakh population is little satisfactory. In Bombay, it's 50%, but it's compensated with local trains. We want to really also make our cities and India global on the global map as global cities. And city like London has about 100 buses per lakh population with all the metro networks, excellent metro network and systems, whereas Bombay has about 28. We have done a national average. It turns out to be 8 buses per lakh population. And we're saying that we need approximately 1 lakh buses. It will cost about 66,000 crore rupees. And if you look at a metro project, only in Mumbai it is 1 lakhs 50,000, 1.5 lakh is only invested in a city like Mumbai. So we say there's a great disparity, and we really want citizens' voices to really reach to the central government. And we clearly understand that it is not the mandate of the central government, but the battle has to be fought at the state level. So in the beginning of this campaign, as a national campaign, we are doing the city-specific consultations in Shimla, Lucknow, Patna, Jaipur, Ahmedabad. We'll be doing it in Ranchi, Guwahati, and then there are 2 state campaigns which are also going on, apart from, of course, Chennai as well as Hyderabad. But there are 2 other campaigns which are going on, one in Delhi and other in Maharashtra, which is 2 state campaigns. Parisar is leading the campaign in Maharashtra, and IDS, Institute of Democracy and Sustainability, under leadership of Mr. Ravi, is leading the campaign in Delhi. And what we really hope through the city dialogues, which is this today, is how do we really bring in the voice of commuter in the core discussion here. And I would just end by 2 points here. One is that yesterday's consultation in Hyderabad said 2 interesting things. One is that even to achieve something called roti kapda makan, the basic needs, one needs public transport as an enabler, as an infrastructure. Second important point was, where are the forums for commuters to really listen to their voices at least once in a month, and can we create momentum around it? And that's really the hope, that we are able to start talking about buses and really contextualize it in our own city and in our own context. And with this, this is what the submission I have to make today. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Avinash. So that's the larger national context and background. But diving in more specifically to this city, to our city of Chennai, we thought we'd share a few. This is, I think, probably information that most people in this group will be aware of as commuters themselves, as people who use MTC. But we thought it would be good to set that out in context. So if you look at Chennai city and the district, that's only a small part of what MTC serves. So MTC or the service area is much bigger. They serve the Chennai metropolitan area, which is a larger space and which has this growing population of, right now it's estimated around 1 crore. And this is no doubt growing further. But so is this area well served by MTC? And if you look at the numbers, which is available on the MTC website itself, the answer would be largely no. Sanskriti, next slide. Yeah, thanks. So MTC briefly has been around quite a while in different forms. In the early part, soon after independence, sometime it was, you had 30 odd buses run by the government. Then this became what we all knew as Pallavan Transport Corporation for many years. And then it got bifurcated, then it got made again into one corporation. And so finally, in the current form, it's been there since 2001 as MTC. And according to the MTC's website, they have 3,651 buses. And இது வந்து எல்லா பஸ்ஸும் சேர்த்து அந்த e-bus, இப்போ I think route 1 from Tiruvannur to High Court or that route, they run some electric buses. அது எல்லாமே சேர்த்து electric bus, small bus, deluxe, எல்லாத்தையும் சேர்த்து they have 3,651 buses total across 582 routes. But when you look at what little information they're sharing on their website and look at their performance, you can see that it's not been very good. You can see that the number of buses has come down, the fleet strength over the years. In the last, the next slide. Yeah, so the fleet strength has come down in general, which is not great. And the average age of the bus has been going up, so which means they do not have too many new buses. They're not buying that many new buses, so we're having that problem as well. And the number of people that MTC take, number of passengers is good, but it's coming down over the time. right? Our buses are always crowded, which is largely because their number of buses have gone down, but they're also serving less people every year because people are moving away from the bus service due to all the problems that it has. So, yeah, next slide. So one of the things, I think a lot of people here are also part of the consumer grievance meetings that MTC holds every quarter. And Adla, the last 1 year or so that I have been representing CAG there, I've noticed that with your vast experience, you bring up a number of points during these meetings to say what are the problems faced by commuters. And invariably, MTC's response is about lack of revenue. Profit illa and the route adnala remove panno illa bus kammi panna venduchu ena we just don't get enough revenue out of the routes abdinte. So but this is a larger problem that all state transport undertakings seem to have. So neenga in the cities ellame pathina they all have that problem, and in fact possibly MTC is doing a little better than some of the other cities like Delhi. So this is something that they themselves say that yes, it's not supposed to be a revenue-making system. It's not supposed to be a profit-making system. That we are not looking to make money out of this, but it's a public service. But obviously, they cannot maintain their buses. They cannot maintain their fleet. They have all of these problems. So what then is a solution? Why do we, so then should we just ditch public transport? It vandave vanda ellarum avanga bike um car um potom abdinte sollama. So that is really not the solution, obviously. Why we need public transport? Ellarkume theriyum 20 varushathukku munnadi irundha traffic kom inniki irukra traffic kom there's a huge difference. The number of two-wheelers, number of cars has been steadily growing, and it doesn't look like it's going to stop growing in the near future. So definitely there's a lot of congestion. 10 varshathukku munnadi if it took you 20 minutes to go to office, now it would probably take you 40 minutes to go to office. So this is a growing issue, and one answer, the main answer would be to get more people to use public transport, for which you need a good public transport system. So you need good buses, good trains, you need people to feel like this is a good alternative and take that public transport. Another issue of why we should do public transport is road safety. So even every day you be read in the paper, media covers how many crashes, how many deaths that, Tamil Nadu overall, Chennai is probably topping the numbers. We contribute a large amount of the deaths and crashes which happen in the state. And till recently, as a state, we've been on the top worst, top 1 or 2 position in terms of deaths and crashes. So by reducing the load on the roads, by having less vehicles on the roads, you're going to, reduce the congestion. You're going to reduce road safety problems. It's going to get better. You're going to have less crashes. You're also going to have better, climatic conditions. Your surroundings are going to be better. During the lockdown, we all noticed how much that the air pollution has come down. That was really clear. We didn't need anybody to tell us this. It was very obvious. But the data also shows that in the PM 2.5, which is the graph at the bottom, and NO2 levels, which is the graph at the top, during the lockdown compared to previous 3 years, they've given data. And you can see the lowest line in both are the lockdown period, on 2-3 months there. And the red and green and blue lines are for the last 3 years. And there's a big drop in the level. So it's indicative of how much transport contributes to the pollution problem in the city. And estimates show that there's about 25%, which is the biggest amount of the pollution comes from transport vehicles, from having vehicular traffic out on the roads. So either korchale we will make a huge difference in terms of air pollution, traffic congestion, road safety, all 3 aspects. And to do so, we need public transit. So when we say public transit, obviously number metro irukku, MRTS irukku, suburban rail irukku, appuram MTC irukku. So why are we particularly focusing on bus? Why are we saying bus is a great answer to all of this? Obviously, all of us know how much the metro costs versus taking an MTC bus. Even with the hiked fares with the MTC, definitely it is more affordable. you will, the other issue will also be that the metro or the rail runs only on certain routes. So ஒரு point to ஒரு point தான் நீங்க எடுத்துன்னு போகலாம். Whereas bus வந்து route மாத்தலாம், இல்ல வந்து ஒரு தேவை இருந்ததுன்னா ஒரு new areaல bus public transport வசதி இல்லைன்னா you can easily change the system, put in buses, put a route there. So there is flexibility to develop these things. And overall, just the amount of area that MTC covers is much more than a metro or an MRTS or a suburban. You know, and even if you give the metro 20 years, it will not be able to cover as much as MTC can. And finally, obviously, always the big question for the government and for everybody else is how much does it cost? And clearly, buses cost much less overall. There's been a lot of articles, a lot of people have written about this, saying that metro cost compared to how much, if we invested even a part of that into a bus system, how much more we can get out of it. So clearly, there are far more advantages to having an excellent bus system in every which way, both in terms of pollution, road traffic, congestion, and all of those. And even within public transit, to have a strong bus system is really important. So, yeah, next slide. So what do we actually have currently? What do we have systems in place to promote public transit and to promote buses? So paperல பாத்தீங்கன்னா எல்லாம் இருக்கு. NMT policyல வந்து bus பத்தி பேசுறாங்க, walking, cycling பத்தி பேசுறாங்க. We should make sure we have all the systems for it அப்படிங்கறாங்க. We have a Kumta Act now to have a unified body which takes care of all of these things, but it's not been functionalized yet. Smart cities mission la வந்து இத பத்தி நிறைய பேசுறாங்க about the need for public transit, for having all comfort and accessibility, all of those things addressed. Even the master plan, which is valid for another 4-5 years, also talks about all this, talks about the problem of traffic congestion, of need to improve these sustainable modes of transport. இது பத்தி எல்லாத்தையும் பேசிட்டு இருக்கோம், but realityல what is happening is causing people to move away from public transit. And you can see that the usage of public transit and walk cycle has come down. Only in terms of railways, in terms of trains, there's a marginal increase. But main increase has been two-wheeler and then or a small amount of increase in terms of car usage. So there is a move towards private transport. So we need to change this and we need to bring it back to public transport to make MTC a much better service than what it is. It was certainly considered a really good service. As a student studying in Chennai, I remember MTC being one of the better services, you know, even 15-20 years ago. And what has happened to it now, and therefore what can we do about it is the question. So some things we are doing. There are a lot of you who are asking questions, putting, you know, suggestions to the MTC every couple of months when we meet. But we can do more as a larger group. And how do we do that? What can we do? So one is we definitely can demand for more buses. We need more buses. It is very, very obvious. So we don't have enough buses for the population, and it is only coming down and not getting any better. We can ask for better services. I'm sure all of us who use MTC, we know how difficult it is to, you know, even get into the bus sometimes. It's crowded, it's not easy to get in and get out. You know, the buses are in bad condition. Definitely there's a huge access issue for, you know, older people or people with disabilities. All of these problems exist. So what can we do? How can we push the government towards changing this? So one of the other things that we can definitely do, and I know that many people are doing, but we could do it as a collective, is to ask questions and demand for more information, greater accountability and transparency. For example, MTC actually on the website data there is no information on how much money they get, how much they're spending, what is their plan. There is absolutely no data. So this is a huge issue. I think we need to ask these questions and push them to give replies and be more accountable to us. Only then we can also look at ways and means to ensure that there are better bus services for the city in the future. Thank you. So that is the you know, background for Chennai and the context for Chennai. And So I'd like to hand over to Sandeep Gandhi, who is an architect and a transport engineer, and he's had over 20 years experience in this field. He, especially in terms of non-motorized and private public transport issues, their planning and implementation. And he is the founder of SGA Architects, and they've been working in partnership with academic and research institutes, CSOs, governing bodies, and so on transportation issues. Over to you, Sandeep.
Was Ananta to speak?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry. Totally forgot the order of things. Shall we just go with this order? Does it matter?
It's okay, as you suggest. That's
yeah. Sorry, Anand. Totally.
Are you able to hear me at all now?
Yes.
Yes. Finally.
Okay.
Yes. Wonderful.
Perfect.
Great.
Okay.
So maybe after Sandeep speaks, we can hand over to Anand.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sandeep, shall I bring up your presentation?
Yeah, sure. So, good morning. Thank you for having me here. And it's wonderful to basically discuss about buses and to see how people are now becoming more and more interested on buses. It did not seem to be the case, at least. I think we've seen more interest in buses post JNU RM, which was around 2007-2008. But before that, even when we used to go to meetings and talk about buses, we were always shown the door in most of the government offices. So it's very encouraging to be basically talking to citizen groups and talking to people, and people demanding buses rather than the experts just basically going ahead and saying why we need more buses. So in that light, all this, whatever was mentioned before me on buses, I mean, I totally agree with all of that. One more point I would like to make here is that why buses are very important, especially for our cities, is because of the trip length. So in Indian cities, on an average, people travel shorter distances. And one reason for that is that we have mixed use cities. We also do not have major segregation in terms of where rich and poor people live in the city. So we have slums throughout the cities and things like that. And so we have, on an average, shorter trip lengths. Even mega cities like Delhi and Mumbai, the average trip length is in the range of 7 to 10 kilometers. Buses are very attractive for use for trips in the range of between 7 and 15 kilometers. And that is why for our cities, more than rail, buses are much more attractive for use for the citizens. And I don't see that changing, at least in the near future, at least for next 30, 40 years or so. So I think it makes a lot of sense to start investing in the buses. Both for climate benefits, both for providing access to opportunity to the city, to the residents of our city. And in that light, so while looking at numbers for Chennai, what I have tried to do is I've tried to basically understand where, I mean, in terms of bus transport, where Chennai stands today. What is its desirable position as of now? What should it be actually? And then what is the gap, and then how can we cover that gap? So what kind of money are we looking at? What kind of resources are we looking at? So these are some of the estimates I've done using some secondary information. It may not be 100% correct, but it gives you a broad idea. So I'll just go through this and then we can discuss on this further. What I've understood is that as of today, Chennai's population is about 1.08 crores. And the annual growth rate of population in the Chennai metropolitan area is about 2.5%. And this 1.08 crores is also for Chennai metropolitan area. The estimate of operational bus fleet in Chennai would be around 4,000, and that's what the number, close to that is what the number was mentioned earlier. So my estimates are based on about 4,000 buses, Chennai having 4,000 buses currently. What I also understand is that on an average, the number of passenger trips per bus per day in Chennai are currently about 1,300, which means that about 0.5 crore, or about 50 lakh passenger trips are being there are about 50 lakh passenger trips in Chennai on buses, which is basically carried by these 4,000 buses. But from the numbers that we know in general from other literature and what we understand from bus transport is that the upper limit of passengers carried per day by each bus would be around about 1,000 passengers when you have low variation in peak hours. So what we are talking about is in a day, every bus would be able to carry about 1,000 passengers, and bus would be doing anywhere between 190 to 220 kilometers in a day. But what we observe from cities like Bangalore, that this number is much lower. This number is in the range of 600 passengers per bus. So it's half of Chennai, less than half of Chennai. So about 600 passengers per bus per day. And that's also because Bangalore sees a very high variation in peak hours. So you have much higher passenger traffic, much higher density of passengers in the buses during peak hours. And it is lower during off-peak hours. And so throughout the day, you get around 600. So the current passenger trip demand, as I said, is about 50 lakhs per day in Chennai. But this is the current demand. The latent demand can be much higher than the current demand. And as has been mentioned, that this demand must have been capped because of the lack of buses, which is, I mean, you are getting almost twice the density of passengers in the bus. That is most likely because the passenger demand is high, but the buses are low. So the capacity is much lower than the demand. So how do we estimate the latent demand? There must be a demand which is untapped, which can be tapped immediately as soon as Chennai starts to add more buses on the street. One can say that if you increase the number of buses, the load in the buses goes down, but the passenger trips remains as 50 lakh, but that generally is not the case. When there are more buses available, then you have your demand also starts to go up. That's what we have seen in other cities. And that's mainly because there is a lot of latent demand. There are a lot of students who will start traveling by buses. There are a lot of trips which are otherwise not taking place. Those start happening by buses. There are lot of times people are using, let's say for short trips, people have started using two-wheelers. They are potential to move to buses. So all of those, that there is a demand which needs to be tapped, and the estimate of that demand can be generated using two numbers. That number is that you can basically estimate it on the basis of the road network that you have in the city. But that's generally true for smaller cities. And the second means of estimating that is that you look at the trip length distribution. So you look at the number of passenger trips in the range of 7 to 15 kilometers. Now, people who are traveling in that distance, in that range, they are all potential bus commuters. So once we start doing that, we start to get some numbers on what can be the estimated or the latent demand of passenger trips in Chennai. And using that, you can then start estimating what can be the bus requirement, immediate bus requirement in Chennai. Sanskriti, can we go to the next slide? So now there are some numbers which are floating around. So for example, and the current tagline for this webinar is based on those numbers. So when we are talking about, for example, World Bank says that anywhere between 0.5 to 1.2 buses per 1,000 population, which is exactly what the tagline says, 50 per lakh, so 50 buses per lakh population. But this number varies and it changes. And my estimate is that for the city of Chennai, this number is actually would be much higher than 50 per lakh. This number would be actually close to a 100 per lakh kind of a thing. And I have this graph which I am presenting here. This graph is basically based on again, as I said, the triplet distribution in Indian cities, and it is now talking about, if I look at, I don't know if you can see the blue line. The blue line is basically looking at when you are carrying, each bus is carrying about 1,000 passengers per day, then these are the number of buses that are required, anywhere in the range of 0.3 to 1 bus per 1,000 population in Indian cities. But if the buses are carrying about 600 passengers in a day, then the range is anywhere between 0.3 to 1.5 buses per 1,000 population. And this range varies. It increases and decreases as the population in the city increases or as the city size increases. And Sanskriti, can you just press the, so this is where Chennai is. No, I mean, just go back one. Yeah. So this is where Chennai is currently. Chennai is standing at about 0.35 buses per 1,000 population. And if I look at what the desired number is, the gap can be anywhere between 6,000 to 11,500 buses from the current. So immediately the additional number of buses that may be required in Chennai could be anywhere between 6,000 to 11,500 buses extra. But even if I take a lower number, if I just follow the blue line, we can estimate that the latent per bus trips in Chennai is estimated to be about 1 crore today. And what we are carrying is about half. So what I estimate is that our capacity in Chennai, the actual latent demand in Chennai is about 2.5 times the capacity, current capacity, and about twice the current demand. Next. So if we start looking at the supply and demand gap in the current year, that is in 2020 for the city of Chennai, the buses per 1,000 population that is there currently is about 0.35. It should, the desired number is actually 0.9 using that, the graph that I had shown in the previous slide. And so the fleet that is about approximately 4,000 today should actually be close to 10,000. So we are missing about the 6,000 buses in as of today, and the same as well as I mentioned for passenger trips. And the mode share actually could have been more than double if we have basically had this kind of a buses. So basically, if we cater to, if we basically try to address all of this latent demand, we could be looking at a 60% or more than 60% mode share of passenger trip buses in Chennai. Of course, this mode share number actually is based on the trip rate, and I'll not get into that. This can vary based on what the trip rate in Chennai is. So it's just an estimate. But I mean, that's for today. But what is happening, what we need to also do is simultaneously start planning on what happens tomorrow. I mean, the situation today is only because we, in most of the cities, we have never done any long-term planning for our bus systems. And so we basically invest some buses, buy a couple of 500, 1,000 buses or so, and then we do not act on anything for the next 10 years or 15 years. And so the number of buses, obviously the buses age and they keep going out of service, and the number of buses keeps reducing. And so because of this lack of long-term planning, we are in the situation that we are, and not just in Chennai, in most of the Indian cities. So what we need to do is to start looking at future. And if we start looking at future, this is what the numbers start looking at. Let's say in 2025, you will probably require 12,500 buses. By 2030, the number reaches 14,500, 2050, 15,500. But it starts to go down further by 2050. And that's because, I mean, we are following that graph. And the reason why this number will actually start to reduce somewhere after 2037, according to my estimates, is because the city size starts to go up, that you will start to have much longer trip lengths, which will start getting catered by your rail systems, maybe suburban rail, or metro rails and things like that. And those are the trips that start becoming attractive for rail systems. But whatever, having said that, you still need about 12,000, need to plan for about 12,500 buses over the next 5 years. And of course, the same numbers that, I mean, similarly, you can look at the numbers for passenger trips in a day and how the mode share goes up and down, then again falls back in 2050. Sanskriti, next slide, please. And using these numbers, I mean, what are the other resource requirements? So the other major resource requirement is land. In most of these Indian cities, what is happening is that, for example, I'll take an example of Delhi. Delhi has been saying that they need 11,000 buses or 12,000 buses immediately. And they have been saying that for the past 5 or 6 years or maybe more. There have been Supreme Court committees, EPCA, and everybody who's been sharing that number and pushing the government to achieve that number. But over the last 8 years, only 1,000 buses have been bought in Delhi. And the reason for that is that they keep saying that they do not have any space to park these buses. So if they increase the fleet size, there is no space to develop depots and terminals and things like that. So there is no land available for the Delhi Transport Corporation. I'm not too sure if that is the situation with the Chennai bus company, but still it is good to have an estimate of the land requirement once you start to approach these kind of numbers in the fleet size. And so the land requirement for 4,000, the land requirement is about 140 hectares. But let's say if in 5 years you start to achieve, let's say 12,500 buses, this land requirement will increase by many fold to 434 hectares. So, I mean, you need significant amount of land to be sourced. Over 300 hectares of land is required in the next 5 years. So, I mean, there's a lot of what you call this. I mean, so for groups like you, I mean, this is what needs to be demanded from the government. Not just that they need start buying buses, but they start providing other resources. So the land is one resource. Then of course you need resources. I mean, the Chennai bus company would require a lot of money to operate these buses, and the reason for that is that urban buses are not profit making. They will never become profit making. There will always be some losses if you have to have a good bus system. And if we estimate these losses to be, I mean, just an assumption about 4 rupees per kilometer, and you estimate the cost of the buses, even just a standard bus, high floor bus, about 35-36 lakh rupees a bus, the cheapest bus available in the market, you start to get an estimate of about close to 2,000 crore rupees are required, between 1,500 to 2,000 crore rupees per year of investment is required over the next 5 years. And of course, this investment will go down. But the point is that there will be significant amount of budget that will have to be allocated to bus company, to Chennai bus company, by the state government or by the city government or whoever that comes under. And the number of buses that will require to be procured is close to 2,000 buses over the next 5 years. Every year you will have to procure close to 2,000 buses to cover that gap, because it's not just the increase in the fleet, but it's also the old aging buses that need to be replaced. And so this estimate takes into account those buses. This number will start to reduce, because once you've covered that gap in 5 years, then the annual increase is less. So, I mean, on an average, then you start adding about 500-600 buses every year. Sanskriti, can you go to the next slide? And so these are the broad takeaways from these numbers. So as I said, that we can target to cover this gap between 4,000 to 12,500 buses over the next 5 years, because it cannot be done immediately. So let's say if you make a roadmap for the next 5 years, this is what needs to be done. Let's say first 5 years to cover the gap, and then next 25 years to basically have a plan to ensure that then the supply and demand gap never increases. So for the first 5 years, you will require about required to procure about 10,150 buses. Then the next following 12 years, another 15,850 buses will need to be procured. And the following 13 years, about 11,000 buses will have to be procured. This includes an estimate of replacing your aging fleet, because every 12 years, and the minimum, and this is the maximum age limit for a CNG bus, let's say. So every 12 years, these buses will have to be replaced, maybe earlier, and so the numbers will change if it is earlier. And similarly, the land requirement for the next 5 years, 295 hectares of land needs to be acquired. For in 117 additional hectares will be required in the following 12 years. And beyond that, you will not require any additional land, because your bus requirement will not be increasing that rapidly. You will not need to develop any additional depots and bus terminals. Similarly, the budget requirement for a basic standard high floor bus, and the cost of developing all this infrastructure, depots and terminals, and also the cost of covering any operational losses for the next 5 years, the government should allocate about 7,200 crores. For the following 12 years after this 5 years, about 6,800 crores and 3,700 crores in total will be required in the following 13 years. So, I mean, you need a large chunk of money immediately to basically bridge this big gap that has occurred now. Also, overall, we are now just talking about basic standard high floor bus. But if you are saying, let's say, 50% of the fleet should be low floor AC buses, then expect the cost to be higher by 33%. And if you expect 100% of the fleet to be AC low floor buses, expect this cost to be higher by about 66%. And if you basically expect 100% of the fleet to be electric AC buses, then expect the overall budgetary requirement to be higher by about 115%. So this is what my commentary on the gap and the estimates of the action plan required are. Thank you very much. I think I'm done.
Thank you, Sandeep, for that. So that I think gave us a very interesting look at the some of the technical parameters and how one could look at what resources we need for having a better bus service in the city. And I don't think many of us are familiar with some of those kinds of calculations. And I mean, broadly we know those ideas, but we may not have delved into the details of it. So it was interesting insight into those aspects. So, but now stepping back a little and looking at the social aspect and the larger issues of what exactly we want going forward, and what kind of bus systems we want will be what we will be discussing next. And to share some thoughts on that is with us Mr. Ananthakrishnan, who is with the Hindu. He's a newsroom convergence editor there and a journalist with many years of experience in this sector, and he's also a very strong promoter of public transit and supporter of the concept and the idea, and he's been writing about NMT and public transit for many years. So without any further ado, I will hand over to him to take us through on what we should be looking for in the future. Mr. Ananthakrishnan.
Anant, I can screen share. I thought that maybe just if you put your video on, I'll screen share because you're on the phone. I'll screen share. I have your presentation, but please unmute yourself.
Okay, done. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. And the one point which I think has not figured yet, we have been talking of a time when we were all really using the bus. And as we know, since March the 22nd, I think everything is at a standstill, and because of COVID. So we don't have a bus system that is functional at this moment. So it is somewhat strange to think of a massive expansion of the bus system when the public bus is not operational at this time. So I thought that we can look at the possibilities of how you could actually use the current time to think of how a safe bus system can be introduced in the future. Now, this is something that's engaging bus operations around the world, because everywhere it has been the same situation. In China, where actually there is a very vibrant bus system in operation in cities like Wuhan and other places where they are ahead of the curve in terms of the pandemic, and they had to suspend their bus services. And it's not as if the bus is going to go away, it's going to come back. But as the International Transport Forum has said about the current status, we are in an until vaccine era, UV era. So until we have a proper medical solution to the situation we are facing now, it is going to be very difficult for people to think of getting back onto the bus with confidence that they will not get affected with the virus, fall sick and so on. So even if we open up the economy, the general expectation is that people do not want to use public transport at this time. It's been the experience even in countries like Britain, in Europe, where they have opened up, in France, for instance, where they have opened up travel, but people are not going back to the bus and to the trains simply because of fear. So I actually think we can look at the future using COVID and the bigger problem that we are about to face, which is climate change. So together, what we should think about is you have to get a safe bus system in place in order to take the countries forward in a green mode. We need a green recovery. So the bus is part of the green recovery. So this is basically what I think. And we can just walk through the situation that's been existing since the past, let's say 2-3 months. So this picture that you see here actually shows the kind of difficult circumstances in which the bus crews have to work. The meager bus crews that have been transporting people who they think might have been affected by the virus. So you can see that there's a crew member with PPE, and he's been operating the bus. So one cannot imagine that this sort of situation can last, or that it is going to be a kind of normal. It is not something believable that we can go forward with the bus system expansion when we are in this condition today. So we will have to think through this situation. Expansion will come later, but we are, like, for instance, take the case of the existing bus fleet that we've been talking about. Our architect friend also said that we are hopefully short of the bus system, the numbers in terms of the ratios to the population. Now, if you see the buses that are already existing, are they serviceable at the end of, let's say, another 3-4 months? How many of those buses are actually working and running? So, are you able to maintain them? So these are questions that have come up now because of the situation. And governments are afraid that, moment they relax things, things are going to be much worse. They did try that in some districts in Tamil Nadu, southern districts. And with the cases going up, in non-Chennai areas, the bus systems were truncated further. So in some places, withdrawn. So this is the situation from which we are proceeding in terms of an expansion of the bus system. So can we go to the next one? So as I have just mentioned, bus services have been suspended between cities, inside cities, and limited services are being run for essential workers. Now, this is a trend that's been witnessed around the world. All over, the public transport networks are at the moment being used to ferry essential workers, health workers, civic workers. So we have to also see that much of our labor, by design, has been shifted to the peripheries. A lot of the slum improvement programs in Chennai, for instance, have taken a lot of people out of town. They have settled them in the peripheries. So they have been depending on public transport, particularly the bus. to go to their workplaces, which is often our own homes where they come and work. So these services have got hit as well. So there's a cascading effect of the absence of a bus service on these workers. So the suburban trains are also not running, which are also an affordable mode, unlike the metro. So we have to think of, and I'm sure in my mind that if you resume the bus service in Chennai, there will be many of these people who would want, for economic reasons, to resume that service, to come use the bus and attend to their work. So this is something that has to be thought of. So the point is, how many of them will feel confident that they are safe? And from the official policy perspective, the government administrative perspective, is it safe for these people to travel? How can they be made to, we have seen that in our circumstances, when you open up, people tend to, lower their guard, and their effort to remain safe temporarily disappears. Like whether it's markets like Coimbatore, like Kasimed, these places you have seen that safe behavior is trumped by the immediate economic necessity. So people, they're not often, mindful of the risks involved. So this is actually one of the issues that will affect the bus system as well. Would a middle-class person who is aware that the virus spreads because of proximity, because you are very close to another person, and the buses may not have been maintained properly. There might be surfaces which harbor the virus. Is he confident enough to travel with other people in the bus? So which might be a sort of self-limiting aspect in terms of demand. So when demand goes down, as we have seen in Kerala, for instance, the government was ready to run the bus. They offered 25% increase in fares, and yet the bus operators, many of them small entrepreneurs, are not willing to operate them simply because it's not viable. People are not willing to use the bus. So this is something that would have to be factored in. I don't know for how long this overhang of the virus, will last until vaccine period and beyond. So once you have a vaccine, people might feel more confident. But does that hold good for everybody that uses a bus? My own anecdotal observation is that if you have a user profile, I don't think we have a good user profile for the bus. You find that they're used by people who have no access to other forms of mobility. There are old people, there are pensioners, there are women, there are children, students. These are essentially the classes of people who are using the bus today in Chennai. So as we have seen, I don't know if anybody has done a proper structured study, but you would find that patronage of the bus has gone down. I use the bus a lot, so I used to use, and I found that it has actually diminished over time. You get a seat, which is never the case in a Chennai bus. I mean, you would have to struggle your way into the bus, but today you get a seat. So why is that possible? One thing is, of course, that some of the buses have become more expensive in terms of the fares. But the fact also is that people have shifted. The working population has shifted to their own means, which explains in Sumana's slide the growth of two-wheelers, for instance. That represents people who have shifted from public transport to two-wheelers. So these are the factors which currently influence our thinking of how this bus transport networks will evolve into the future, even when we get past the virus issue. So can we go forward? So this I thought might be interesting, because this is the International Transport Forum. This is global data that they have gathered from people who have used a certain Apple service. As you can see, in walking and other modes, it has actually declined the demand sharply from a certain time. Now there is nobody, the forum, the International Transport Forum, or the Union of transport operators under UITP, nobody is clear that demand will resume to a certain extent anytime soon. Nobody is able to predict this, because economies are basically finding it difficult. So whether there is going to be enough economic activity in terms of services, like how long will it be before you are able to go to restaurants, you are able to go to malls, other gatherings, which actually drive the demand for certain travel. So until that happens, it's going to be tough to expect that bus travel will be a popular mode of transportation other than for essential purposes. So as we discussed about Kerala, it brings up the question of fares. So who's going to meet the differential in terms of operational losses? So so these are open questions. I mean, I don't think anybody has an answer to all this. So it's just that maybe we have to use some kind of demand assessment, which was used to forecast future demand. Earlier, one of the speakers used forecasting on what the likely demand would be, the likely fleet augmentation should be. So we have to currently assess how many people want what kind of mobility using the bus. So once we know that, like educational institutions, so how long will it be before they are back on stream? And will it be back on stream in the way that it used to be? And will it be that students will want to use the bus to go to their schools in long distances, over long distances? Or will it be a mix of things, like you attend school for 2-3 days, but you don't attend for the rest of the week, and then you have remote learning. So which will again have an impact on the demand. So that's the other aspect. So we can go forward. So these are some of the aspects that we need to look at in the future, as and when we are able to refloat public transport using buses. So primarily, everybody is concerned about the safety of crew, just like medical crews, healthcare workers. Bus crews are also exposed to the public. So in the West, what has been happening is that they have been redesigning, or rather reconfiguring their buses so that the access of the passenger to the driver, there is no conductor there, so the driver is minimal. So they have been putting in plexiglass separations, so the driver is separated from the passengers. So do we have to think of something like that, so that the driver is safe? What do you do about the conductor? Because in our context, the conductor is mixing with crush loads of people. So how is it going to affect boarding of the bus? How is it going to affect ticketing? So there's already been talk that even in India, we should have cashless ticketing and we should have advance payments, so there is no transaction on board the bus. And how far this is feasible from a technology point of view, operational point of view, is something we don't yet know. And then you look at the frequent sanitizing of buses. In this case, it says rolling stock, but then we are here talking about buses. So do we have the system when we don't even have the resources to maintain our buses properly, to scientifically sanitize them at the end of each trip? So this is a major factor, because fomite transmission, as they call it, where the surfaces are affected by the virus, and people would have to, we feel confident that the bus is actually sanitized when they're using it. But then the bus is not a point-to-point service either, a city bus. So you have people boarding and alighting. So how is this going to operate? So this is an open question. So no answers yet. And then physical distancing. So as we discussed, it has got implications for boarding. It's got implications for alighting, implications for how you sit, how much distance is maintained between passengers. So these are, even in the Western context, in countries like Singapore, in where they have opened up, and where they've been working, and then you have London, where they have tried to operate the buses. So these are issues which will determine what will be the demand, what will be the economics in the future. So then again, the other issue of universal masking and hand sanitizing. Now, we had this discussion with one of the leading epidemiologists and a virologist, Dr. Jacob John. So his opinion was that masking is a very good way of refloating public transport, because it's fairly safe. Once you have all the people universally masked, then the spread of the virus is practically contained. That was his thesis. Now, we haven't studied this in a sort of randomized controlled way. So, but then it stands to reason that if you maintain physical distancing, if you are universally masked, and if you have a culture of hand sanitizing, let's assume that the conductor of the bus is keeping a hand sanitizer with him, and every person who boards is required to use that hand sanitizer as he boards. Then we have some viable system, which can help us use a bus service. So this, of course, has implications for operations. Like how many services can you operate with this kind of rigorous protocols through the day? So first of all, as we discussed, what's the demand? We don't know. If there is a demand, how many can you operate? So it's sometimes it's cyclical. Because the bus is not there, people will not try to use it. So because they believe that the bus is not safe, they will not try to use it. So these are difficult questions, according to me, but we will have to address them at some point, because these are real questions. So can we go ahead? So let's look at some of the positives as I see them. This COVID-19 is actually an opportunity, because now if actually there is a demand and there's been a shortfall of bus fleets, at least in some areas, if not in the core of the city where they've already withdrawn. Like if you take the newer developments like OMR, where a lot of housing stock has come up, Western Chennai, where a lot of housing stock has come up, then you will find that the deficits are once again showing up when activity is up. It's back on, and people feel that there's not enough support. So this gives us the opportunity to address what some earlier speakers were mentioning about the deficit in terms of ratios of buses to the population. We should be able to address them. And if physical distancing is the official position, and we can make it legally enforceable, the government says that you have to maintain a distance like this, and we can say that it's not possible for us to use the bus unless you augment the capacity by so much. So, which actually gives us an opportunity to press the case. Now, there is currently, if you see, all over the world, including in India, including in Tamil Nadu, governments are suddenly not talking budgets. So they are saying that we will spend the money required to augment safety, to augment health treatments. So people are not talking, about a resource crunch. So which is good news for us, because there is a mood to spend for public facilities, and which we should be able to say that you please spend the money and make the bus service safe. And all said and done, in a country, in a city of our size, where the population is so vast, like we mentioned about the greater Chennai area, we saw the figure that it's more than 1 crore. So if that is the case, so what are you giving us? Like there are some areas in Chennai, even today, which are entirely dependent on bus services, and they are heavily serviced. Like for instance, take the western suburb of Pundamalli. You have excellent bus connectivity. You have on OMR, you have great connectivity. So these areas must be particularly disadvantaged right now. And if they have to maintain these protocols, health protocols post-COVID, then they need to have the assurance that the bus will be at a certain level. So there are many other areas like this. So we need to build the campaign around, I think in my mind, that we ask the government to maintain safety in public service and provide the public service at a decent level. So these are, some of the imperatives for a post-COVID safe bus service. So then there's like, we mentioned about, bus termini. There was a reference to bus termini. Do we have the capacity to park so many buses? So we actually need to have good infrastructure to avoid crowding in existing termini, and which is an opportunity for us to build more. So, and then to, as we discussed, ticketing changes, avoiding contact, and building transactions which are prepaid. Let's say people are familiar with that kind of transaction mode now. So, what technology will be used? So, will it be a kind of card which you use some wireless technology like they do on the metro, that you tap and then your fare is debited? It is possible now with the current difficulties for people to be given simple systems, and they will adopt them. If you sell them a card which works with the reader and say that you buy this card and keep propping it up, they will do it. There are a lot of people who are now familiar with those modes of transactions, so it is not difficult. We should be able to achieve that. And we of course went over the issue of slump in ridership, so which will hopefully pick up. And in an economy that's growing and there's so much pressure for growth, we should be able to push growth in the direction of public transport rather than leave it to the automobile industry, which is looking at this as a kind of great opportunity to push, for ownership of private vehicles. Now, I can imagine that at this given time when the pandemic is so strong, there is a great urge to own one's own vehicle. So this is actually a time when we should push the NMT idea, which all over the world they have been doing, and a lot of the cities, for instance, Paris, for instance, somewhere in even in the US, even in New York, people have been ready to set apart road space for NMTs. So more pavement space, more bicycling space. So this is our way of retaining the space for public use. How we allocate space in the current context for various road users is something that we need to focus on right now. We need to push the political agenda that it's people who need the space, not vehicles. So right now, let's push for people to be able to walk, which is a very safe, distanced, kind of healthy way to commute. And then bicycles. So we need to push for retention of space away from private vehicles to other modes. So this is easier said than done, because we have so much of demand for private vehicle use. And so basically safety in the immediate context, safety in the long term, which we have discussed. And the question is, are the days of congested travel really over? Well, it depends on a combination of various infrastructure facilities that can be put in. So the medical hurdle, as I said, once the vaccine arrives, perhaps there will be a galvanized response. So we have to work towards many of these imperatives that we discussed, keep discussing them, and then arrive at some recommendations. So I think that's primarily what I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I think that was a very useful look at also the social aspects of things, because bus transit is not just about the number of buses and things, but also the people, both the crew and the passengers. And in this current context, I think there are some very important points that you raised that we need to consider and keep in mind. And with this, I think we'll move on to the talking of the social aspects, move on to the people who really matter, the people who actually use the buses. And I'll just hand over to Harish to introduce our first speaker from the commuter groups, who are a very, very important part of this whole bus system.
Thank you, Sumana. Now I request Raghuraman Kalyanaraman, Assistant Professor from Government Arts College, Nandanam, Chennai. He's a disability activist and honorary secretary of Karna Vidya Foundation, focusing on empowerment of visually impaired through education, focusing on empowerment of visually empowered, impaired people through education, employment, and other livelihood opportunities. He's also a member of Disability Rights Alliance India. Sir, I request Raghuraman Kalyanaraman to share his valuable thoughts.
Thank you so much, and good morning everyone there, and in fact good afternoon rather. And so it's an important occasion where we all come together to understand and also to see a possibility of change in the commutation part, and especially my cup is with in terms of person with disabilities. As you all aware, the 2016 Rights for Persons with Disability Act, which is in turn in align with the United Nations Conventions for the Rights for Persons with Disability Act 2007, and India is a signatory there. In that sense, having that as a background, having that RPD Act as a background, today's scenario and COVID, with the current situation on hand, right? Commutation becomes highly critical and highly questionable. Rather, will I be able to move around? That's the first question that comes to my mind, right? Soon after the lockdown is over and things all settle down, I need to also earn my livelihood. I need to commute to my college, right? And things are there, right? So all person with disabilities are 21 in number as on date, with reference to the act as such. There are many more. In fact, several disabilities are there, which we don't recognize much, but at least as per the act, it is 21. The idea I'm trying to mention that is specifically there are people who need to crawl and climb. There are people with multiple disabilities who don't have limbs, right? And there are people with disabilities who have muscular motor problems, right? And muscle problems, right? And we had a very interesting demo at the bus at the commissionerate office somewhere during Jan or Feb, I'm not sure, wherein one person really fell down on the wheelchair. Like there was an automatic ramp taking you up, but what happened is, as they were about to reach inside, reach the inner yard of the bus, the lady fell down. It was a big crisis over there, right? She was already with a CP, sorry, MS, multiple sclerosis, added to which this again a problem. Now, what are the problems exactly when I go with the bus? Right, I need to climb. First of all, climbing is first of all identifying the bus itself is a problem for the visual impact. Come with that, I mean, starting there, right? The pavements, it is actually linked with the road safety as well, the sidewalk as well, right? So when I talk about commutation, right? So we all talk about the existing and the new ones and the future, right? But only when we make a provision, a support system healthy in the current scenario, in the existing structures, it will be meaning for us to understand and also implement a future uh, plan of action where it becomes more accessible. For example, if I stand in a pavement wherein there is no difference between the pavement and the road, in fact, right? So somewhere at the borderline, I need to stand, right? For a sighted person or for a person with sight or with minor disabilities, in the sense like hearing impaired. I mean minor in the sense not otherwise, minor with reference to identifying the context of a bus. Identifying a bus, it is easy for him to see the numbers. But for a visual impaired, standing there and understanding where the bus stands, where the bus stops, right, itself is a critical thing, right? So there should be a coordination. It cannot be a isolated bus initiative or accessible bus alone. Commutation includes the sidewalk, the logistics in the road, right, and the bus as well, right? So everything should be coordinated. So that is the first critical point. The second, with reference to the commutation, is to climb over, right? Visual impaired, of course, somehow or the other, we will hit the stick or somewhere get some help and climb up. But how about a person with in a wheelchair, or a person who crawls and climbs up, or a person with multiple disabilities, right? So will we be able to make such provisions, not specifically for persons with disability, but an inclusive bus environment in the existing bus as well, in the regular bus, I mean upcoming buses rather. So climbing in, then holding on to rails, like holding on to the pillar, the bars over there, right? That is also certain steps. If you could see the bus steps, okay, it is little higher, right? It is little very higher in the current buses, right? It is too high and very difficult for sometimes even the step between one, the height between one step and the other is totally different in some buses, right? So then again, we need to move with the wheelchair inside to sit around, right? Maybe we can, for example, we can allot the back space or the middle space of the bus totally. For example, around two on either side, like for example, four people sitting. We can allot specifically for persons with wheelchair, right? Something like that. Some provision should be brought in, right? And this can be done. Only the idea and a correct plan of action will help us. So moving with the wheelchair inside the bus, and also a person with visual impairment, right? Even in the existing scenario, there is a seat allotted for persons with disabilities, but unfortunately, it is not being properly supported or given to them, right? There will be someone else will be sitting, and even if we ask, no one will look at, and things like that, right? The practical scenario is that no driver, no bus conductor is fully aware of the needs of the disabled people, right? That's a fact, because my own friend who commutes from here to Mahabalipuram, right, on daily basis in the last few months is not doing now, but he was not given a proper treatment at the KK Nagar bus depot, right? There are many such incidents, right? And as well, since we are using a free pass, right, there is no accommodation for us to even, the driver even after seeing us, or the the conductor even after hearing our voices, will never even stop over there. Like they will just like before we reach that bus door, they will just move off, right? Because we are not going to anyway take a ticket, and that they feel as a loss to them. Their basic days wages are gone. That's what they feel like, right? So there is a great sensitization to be done, and also there should be stickers, braille stickers to be fitted in at the entry of the door, at the seat level, near the seats where they sit, and more importantly, there should be a sticker, right, of the bus number. If it is, for example, 21G, for example, there is a different number for the record. There will be a bus number differently for the office record. So we should know that, because some conductors or some drivers, right, or even sometimes in the bus itself, we have been humiliated. So if you want to raise a complaint, or if you want to register our thoughts, we are not in a position to know the bus exact registration number. And when we go and talk to the authorities over the bus transport authorities, nothing happens. They merely say, you bring the evidence, right? So how come a visual impaired will do that, right? Even for a other disabled person as such, right? And finally, I mean, last two more points maybe. We should bring in, first of all, an app. Uh, there are modes of, for example, one methodology was followed to identify the government has brought in a remote device. But that is not that much in the pilot project it was run. And I heard from my own friends saying it was not that much easy for them to identify the bus numbers using that remote device, right? And it is not that much used after that. It was only initiated for some time, and it is not there's no thought about it. There's no space about it now, right? There's no talk about it now, right? And there is, so what we need to do is, there's an app called Where Is My Train. Such a app should be brought for the bus transport as well. Where is my bus, right? If the bus comes, how long, I mean, at what distance it comes, and I mean, what time is going to reach, or which bus is standing before me. All this should be captured in a single app, like in a very accessible app, in a mobile, right? In a simple basic Android mobile, not with the higher end, right? In a basic Android mobile, or through IVRS. There should be some IVRS platform through which we can access on the bus stand, standing on the bus stand, can dial that number and see where it comes and so on. So these sort of provisions should be made. Secondly, the safety is very important, right? As there are many questions raised by the previous speaker that implies even to the person with disability, where the safety is first priority. So that there is no safety at all when we stand on the pavement, when we reach out to the bus. So these things should be ensured over there. There should be a bus officer, an officer from the representing the bus transport office, to facilitate a support system, or any other mechanism could be also appreciated, right? Because there are some digital what to say, digital screening is there. Like I mean, a sighter is able to see where the bus comes and so on. It flashes there, right? But the same can be also captured into this app, right? That will minimize the anxiety, the tension, or the little trouble. It will not totally eradicate. And that is and very importantly, I want to note that there's no single solution for every issue, right? Every challenge, right? If I want to grab the hold, for example, for me as a visual impaired, I can just grab it, right? Grabbing that bar is not a difficulty. But for a person with muscle problem, motor issues, how will he drag it? Or I mean, how will he hold on to? Right? It will not stick to his hands, right? So he has to be given his support system, right? So and as well for a hearing impaired, that should be that the conductor and driver both should know sign language. Very importantly, both should know sign language, because only then they can come convey or converse and understand the hearing impaired issues. It is not like just merely giving a money, right, and giving a ticket on the other hand, right? It is more than that. There are certain things that we need to ask and clarify, right? So that is, the sign language should be brought in, braille should be brought in, tactile stickers should be brought in, right? And also the safety in the on the roadside and at the bus itself should be brought in, right? So people think merely audio alone will support them. Giving an audio, for example, I have been commuting in train as well. There is a audio system enabled in the newly installed trains, but the sometimes the problem is the station moves. I mean, I'm sorry, the train moves away from the station, but still it says the same station name. Right? The idea is, of course, it is all to do with the sensor. It is all to do with the GPR accuracy and so on, right? But the idea is, so that is not the only solution that we can provide with. In fact, the metros are also, many claim to be more accessible. Unfortunately, I say, my friends, right, I can also prove it to you in person, physically, it is not at all accessible, right? We struggle a lot in terms of, I specifically say in terms of visual impact, right? It is not much consulted, right? Without, right, nothing about us without us. That is the policy that should be at every stage, from the design level, from the policy level. There are good experts. There are very good experts in the field on every platform, on every department. And we have already submitted our requests to the transport authorities. Unfortunately, everyone sees us a vote bank. I mean, a very minority, a vulnerable group, right? We are just not able to, just because we are very less in number. That is the impression being given, right? Because even the conductors themselves say, hey, I mean, anyway, one visual impaired is going to board here, or only one or two at the other end, any other disabled person, right? So why should I need to stop, right? For one or two, why should I need to stop? Or one or two, why should I need to bother? Right? So every citizen, right? தமிழ்ல சொல்லணும்னா, தனி ஒருவனுக்கு இல்லை எனில் தனி ஒருவனுக்கு உணவில்லை எனில் ஜகத்தினை அழித்திடுவோன்னு பாரதி சொன்னது வந்து உணவுன்றது இங்க ஒரு உரிமை, ஒரு உரிமையின் குரல். லைக் ஃபுட், ஷெல்டர் அண்ட் dress and everything are primary requirements of any respectable citizen of this land. So it is the right of the citizen to also access the location. The right to lead, right to drive, and right to live is our goal. And I hope I have made my points a little clear. If there is anything that I have misled or any sort of a confusion, you can reach out to me. And thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Raghuram sir. You were very clear in your thoughts, and you gave us some valuable inputs on the challenges faced by visually disabled people and other people of other disabilities that is always hidden from the main agenda. And due to this present COVID situation, we could see this as an opportunity. As the last speaker spoke, there is no constraint for budget requirements. I sincerely hope we could include all your requirements while we plan for a better bus service. Thank you, sir. Now I request the next speaker. He is Mr. M.K. Parthasarathi, Secretary Consumer Forum. He has been an MTC bus commuter since 1952. He understands the issues and challenges faced by the passengers while traveling public buses. And as a Secretary of Consumer Forum, he has taken up issues of passengers to the MTC department concerned and has been instrumental in bringing many bus services to several parts of Chennai. I request Parthasarathi sir to share his thoughts. Parthasarathi sir, please unmute and speak. Sanskriti, can you unmute Galaxy A2 core?
ஹலோ புரியுதா?
எஸ் எஸ் சார், எஸ் கேக்குது
பேசலாமா?
பேசலாம் சார்.
As I told you, 1952 நான் கம்யூட்டர் இருந்தோம் தான் பஸ், எம்டிசி பஸ்ஸில் தமிழ்லேயே பேசுகிற எல்லாருக்கும் பொதுவா நீங்கள் ஆல்சோ பட் ரொம்ப எல்லாருக்கும் புரியுன்ற சொல்கிறான்னு. அதனால் அப்போ ஆரம்பித்து படிப்படியாக 2004 இந்த கன்சூமர் ஃபோர்க்கு செக்ரட்டரி மெம்பராக சேர்ந்தேன். மெம்பராக சேர்ந்த பிறகு என்னுடைய இன்வால்மெண்ட்னாலையும் என்னுடைய பழங்கீட்டினாலையும் அவள் வந்து என்ன எம்டிசியில் ரெப்ரஸன்டேட்டிவ் போய் ஜாயின் பண்ணிக்கோ, உங்களுடைய கருத்துக்களை நான் சொல்லுன்னு ஆலோசனை கொடுத்தான். ஒவ்வொரு முறையும் நான் போகும்போதும் அந்த கம்ப்யூட்டர் என்னென்ன ப்ராப்ளம் எல்லாம் ஏற்படுற ஆலோசனை பண்ணி எக்ஸ்பீரியன்ஸஸ் நான் நோட் பண்ணி அவளை சப்மிட் பண்ணிடுவேன் எல்லாருக்குமே. ரைட் ஃப்ரம் எம்டி எவரிபடி எல்லாருக்கும் அப்போ ஒத்து போச்சு. என்னுடைய ரெப்ரஸன்டேஷன் முக்கியமானதெல்லாம் ஜாஸ்தி அதிகம் பேசாமலுக்கு என்ன சொல்லப்படுறேன். இந்த பீக் ஹவர்ஸில் கண்டக்டர் எல்லாம் பீக் ஹவர் தவிர பாக்கி நேரங்களில் பஸ்ஸு உள்ளுக்குள்ளே போய் இருக்கிற டிக்கெட் கொண்டு ஏற்பாடு பண்ணி அது சக்ஸஸ் ஆச்சு. நம்பர் 2, டிரைவர்கள்லாம் சீட்டில் உட்காந்து வண்டி ஓட்டும் போது செலுத்தக்கூடாது, ஓட்டு பண்ணக்கூடாது அப்படின்றத செக்ரட்டரிக்கு சொல்லி அதை ப்ரொவிகேட் பண்ண சொன்னேன். இது சக்ஸஸ் ஆச்சு. அதுக்கப்புறம் இப்போ அனதர் திங் இஸ், சில பேரெல்லாம் லேடிஸே முதற்கொண்டு பஸ் ஸ்டாண்ட் நிற்கும் போதும் என்ன பஸ் இது எப்படி போகிறது புரியாமல் இருக்கான். அவனுக்காகவே கண்டக்டர்ஸி பின்னாடி பஸ் எந்த போகிறது அப்படிங்கிறத குறிப்பாக இன்னொன்று சஜஷன் கொடுத்துட்டு இருக்கேன். ட்ரைனிங் பாஸ். அதுக்கப்புறம் இந்த பஸ் இப்போல்லாம் பார்த்தீங்கன்னாக்கா அதையும் பிரேக் இருக்காது, பிரேக் டவுன்ஸ் எல்லாம். பிகாஸ் ஒன்ஸ் ஐ டோல்ட் எம்டி பஸ்ஸு பிரேக் டவுன் ஆச்சுனாக்கா டிரைவர் தான் ரெஸ்பான்சிபிளாக இருக்கணும் அப்படின்னு போட்டேன். அதனால் அதுலேருந்து டிரைவர்கள் கேரக்டர்ஸை நம்ம ரன் பண்ணி இல்லாதபடி பண்ணிருக்கா 2 வருஷமா. இப்போ இந்த கோவிட் பீரியடில் எல்லாமே கோர்ஸ் இருக்கிற போதும் நம்ம வந்து பஸ் ஓடினா போகிற லெவல் வந்துருக்கோம். இப்போ சமீபத்தில் ரொம்ப பேர் பஸ்ஸில் டிக்கெட் வாங்கி வச்சுருக்கான், 1000 ரூபா பஸ்ஸில் வச்சுருக்கான். என்ன பண்ண புரிய மாட்டேன்றது. அதனால் டிரான்ஸ்போர்ட் மினிஸ்டர் வந்து இந்த 1000 ரூபா பஸ் எல்லாம் எப்போ உபயோகப்படுத்துறது அப்படிங்கிறத ப்ரெஸ் நோட் போட்டு பப்ளிக் பண்ணி உபயோகப்படுத்தினாக்கா எல்லாரும் சௌகரியமாக நான் ஃபீல் பண்ணுறேன். அதுக்கப்புறம் முக்கியமாக ஃபஸ்ட்டு 10 மினிட்ஸ் ஏறும்போது எல்லா லேடிஸுமே சம்டைம்ஸ் இருக்கோ இல்லையோ ஜென்ஸுக்கு உட்காந்துடுறான். அது என்ன போல ஜென்ஸுக்கு நம்ம கஷ்டமாக இருக்குது. அதனால் ஃபஸ்ட் கண்டக்டருக்கு அப்போ அதிகாரம் கொடுக்கும். பஸ்ஸு சீட் லேடிஸே காலியாக இருந்த ஒழிய மற்றபடிக்கு ஜென்ஸ் சீட்டில் இதில் உட்காரக்கூடாது இப்போ சட்டம் கொண்டு வரணும்னு ட்ரை பண்ணிருக்கேன். டிஸ்ட்ரிக்ட் லெவலில் ட்ரை பண்ணிருக்கேன். இப்போது எனக்கு முன்னாடி அந்த பேசியிருக்கான். அவன் வந்து டெக்னிக்கலாக பேசியிருக்கா, எக்ஸ்பிரஷன் பேசியிருக்கா, இமேஜ் பேசியிருக்கான். நமக்கு இப்போ பஸ் ஓடினா போகிற லெவலில் உட்காந்துருக்கோம். இப்போ நான் பஸ் கம்யூட்டர் தான் ஆல்பேட்லேருந்து. அதனால இந்த பஸ் ஓடுறதுனாலே எதுவும் ப்ராப்ளம் இருக்குன்றத நான் டெய்லி அனுபவபூர்வமாக கண்டிருக்கேன். அந்த அனுபவபூர்வமாக கண்டிருக்கிறத நானே படிப்படியாக ஒவ்வொரு ஸ்டேஜஸ் ஒவ்வொரு ரெக்கார்டிங்லையும் கண்டினியூ கொடுத்துட்டு இருக்கேன். இப்போ வந்து நமக்கு இந்த ஓடா பஸ்கெல்லாம் ஓட வச்சு அவளுக்கு வருமானம் கொடுத்து நமக்கு பஸ் உபயோகம் பண்ணோம். இப்போ ஒரு ஹேண்டிகேப் சொன்னார். இப்போ நான் பார்த்த வரைக்கும் பஸ்ல எல்லாம் டிரைவர்கள் ஹேண்டிகேப் வந்திருக்காரா, ஒரு இடம் கொடுங்கோ, அவன் ஏறட்டும் இருக்கான். ட்ரெயின் ஆகட்டும், ஹேண்டிகேப் ஆகட்டும், பஸ் ஆர்டர் இருக்குங்க. ஹேண்டிகேப் பண்ணான்னாக்கா பஸ்ஸை கான்ட்ராக்ட் கொண்டும் இறங்கி இறங்கி ஏற்றி அவன் சீட்டு உட்கார வச்சுருவான். என் கண்ணில் பார்த்துருக்கேன். அதனால அந்த கிரீவன்ஸ் பஸ்ஸுக்கு எனக்கு கவலையப்பட வேண்டாம். ஹேண்டிகேப் இருக்கிற விஷுவல் இம்பார்க்கெல்லாம் ஆட்டோமேட்டிக்காக பஸ் ஸ்டாப் எழுந்துடுறான், உட்கார வேண்டாம். நானே பஸ்ஸை போதும் ஓ கண் தெரியாதா எழுந்து உட்காரச்சு நான் நின்று வேண்டியிருக்கேன். டிராவல் அது ரூட் நம்பர் 1ல் வந்திருக்கேன். அந்த மாதிரி பண்ணிருக்கிறதுனால இருக்கு. நமக்கு இப்போ வந்து முக்கியமா பஸ் ஓடணும், ஓடி நமக்கு உபயோகமா இருக்கணும், பஸ்ஸுக்கும் ரெவன்யூ வரணும், யோசிக்கணும். அதுக்கப்புறம் தான் எக்ஸ்பிரஷன் எல்லாம் இந்த புது பஸ் எல்லாம் ஒன்று இருக்கு. எல்லா பஸ்ஸுமே கிளீனா இருக்கு. என்னுடைய பாயிண்ட் ஆஃப் வியூ பஸ் வெளியே பிரகாசம் வந்து போராது, உள்ளுக்குள்ளேயும் கிளீன் பண்ண வச்சுக்கணும் அப்படின்றதாக டெப்போக மேலே எழுதி கொடுத்துருக்கேன். அது எம்டிக்கு சொல்லியிருக்கேன். இப்போ அது அட்டன் பண்ணிருக்கா. நமக்கு இப்போ இந்த கோவிட் பீரியட்ல கிட்டத்தட்ட மார்ச் 22ஆம் தேதியிலிருந்து ஒரு பஸ் டிரைவர் கண்டக்டர் இல்லை, இது அப்படி பட்டி வரத்தன் இருக்கான். அவன் நம்ம மனுஷாதான் பஸ் டிரைவர் கண்டக்டராக இருந்திருக்கான். அவளுக்கு வாழ்வழிக்கணும், பஸ் ஓடணும், இன்கம் வரணும், நமக்கும் பஸ் கிடைக்கணும். அந்த அந்த அஸ்பெக்டை யோசனை பண்ணணும். இந்த கோவிட் பீரியட்ல நான் சொல்லியிருக்கேன், லெட்டர் எழுதி போட்டிருக்கேன், ஃபியூச்சருக்கு நீங்கள் பஸ் ஓட்டுக்கோ. ஓடுற பஸ்ல கோவிட் நிற்காது. எப்போ கோவிட் வரும்னாக்கா வீக்காக இருக்கணும். ரெண்டாவது தப்பா எடுத்துப்பான். போலீஸ்கார எல்லாரும் சரி, அப்போ லீவாக இருக்கிற போதெல்லாம் ஸ்மோக், நைட் படுக்கிற போதெல்லாம் ட்ரிங்க் இருக்கு, ஹார்ட் வீக் ஆடும். அந்த மனுஷாளுக்கெல்லாம் மோஸ்ட்லி உடனே அஃபெக்ட் ஆடும். இப்போ நான் பார்க்குற போதும் நானும் ரெசிடென்ட்டாக இருக்கேன். இந்த ஏரியாவில் ஒரு ஜாஸ்தி கிடையாது, ஃப்ரீயாக இருக்கும். பிகாஸ் ஹெல்த் பாயிண்ட் ஆஃப் வியூ அந்த கோவிட் இருக்கிறதுல நம்ம வந்து பஸ் ஓட ஆரம்பிக்கணும். குறிக்கோள் இதுக்கு சிஎம் ஓகே பண்ணி பஸ் ஓட ஆரம்பிச்சாக்கா அனுகூலமாக இருக்கும். ஓடுற பஸ்ஸில் நிற்காது. ஏன்னா ஓடுற பஸ்ஸை கொட்டா விட மாட்டோம் யாரும்.
ரெண்டாவது ஆள் போலிங்கிறாரு 5 பேர்ல.
அதனால பஸ் ஓடும் போதும் கீழே ஓட்டினாக்கா எந்த பாதிப்பு இருக்கான்னு அபிப்பிராயம். அதனால பஸ் ஓடலாம். பஸ் ஸ்டாண்ட்லேயே கூட நிறைய க்ரௌட் இருக்கு. க்ரௌடில் எதனால வருது, நிறைய கம்யூண்ட் ஏறுறபடினால அவளுக்கு அனுகூலம் பண்ணுறதுக்கு பஸ்ஸுக்கு ஒரு டிரைவ் வாலண்டியர் போட்டும் ஏற்றி விடணும். இந்த பண்ணியிருந்தான் பண்ணுறது இல்லை. இதெல்லாம் பண்ணாக்கா இந்த கோவிட் பேர் கூட பஸ் ஓடு எதிர்பார்க்குறேன். அட்லீஸ்ட் இந்த ஆகஸ்ட் மாதம் 1ஆம் தேதிக்காவது நம்ம மினிஸ்டர் சீஃப் மினிஸ்டரும் பிரைம் மினிஸ்டர் கன்சிடர் பண்ணி பஸ்ஸை ஓட வச்சாக்கா 2 பேருக்கு அனுகூலமாக்கணும்னு ஃபீல் பண்ணுறேன். அதனால முதல்ல பஸ் ஓடட்டும், அதுக்கப்புறம் நம்ம எக்ஸ்பென்ஷன் பற்றி யோசிக்கலாம். என்னோட கருத்துக்கள். தேங்க்யூ வெரி மச். ரெக்கார்டிங் போயிருக்கா? ஓகே, ஹலோ ரெக்கார்ட் பண்ணிட்டீங்களா?
தேங்க்யூ சார். ரெக்கார்ட் பண்ணிட்டோம் சார். தேங்க்யூ பார்த்தசாரதி சார்.
ஓகே ஓகே
தேங்க்யூ
ஓகே.
வெரி மச்.
அதான்
தேங்க்யூ வெரி மச். ஸோ
பேசக்கூடாது, ஃப்ரீயா பேசணும், எவ்ரிடே பேசணும். அதான் என் பாயிண்ட் ஆஃப் வியூ. தேங்க்யூ.
okay, okay, okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. So to briefly recap what Parthasarathi sir said was he explained about the various initiatives that he took over the long years to improve bus services in Chennai. That includes improving the behavior of conductors towards passengers, improving the cleanliness of MTC buses, and he also talked about due to the present COVID pandemic, the bus revenues have gone down, and the salaries are not getting paid uh, to the staff, and he wanted an early resumption of bus services so that everyone would get benefited from it. Thank you, sir. Now I request M. Navanitam madam. She is President Manurpet Magalir Nugarvor Padgapu Sangam. She has taken up issues concerning public interest for the last 25 years. She has been instrumental in ensuring various government schemes reach the public. She has ensured that no family in Manurpet goes without ration card, and she has helped many widows avail the widow pension and ensured poor children receive government scholarship. She has taken up issues regarding MTC bus shortages in the peri-urban areas of Chennai, and I request M. Navanitam to please share her views. Navanitam madam. Unmute பண்ணிட்டு வாங்க. Navanitam madam, please unmute and speak. Sanskriti, can you unmute Navanitam?
I'm not able to. I have asked, but she will have to do it herself.
Okay. Navanitam madam, கேக்குதுங்களா? Unmute பண்ணிட்டு வாங்க.
மேடம் உங்க ஸ்கிரீன்ல வந்து ஒரு மைக்ரோஃபோன் சிம்பிள் ஒரு சேப்பு கலர்ல ஒரு கோடோட இருக்கும். அதை வந்து டச் பண்ணீங்கன்னா அன்மியூட் பண்ணுவீங்க. அதுக்கப்புறம் நீங்க பேசுறது கேட்கும் எங்களுக்கு.
Hello.
No, I don't think she's able to.
Yeah.
Why don't we move on to the next speaker, and then we'll come back to her if we are able to solve that problem for her.
Sure. Okay. Now I request AP Srinivasan sir. He is Secretary Consumer Protection Force Chennai. He has taken up issues concerning consumers for the last 28 years. His core focus has been electricity issues concerning consumers, and he is also an right to information activist. He has conducted many awareness programs regarding right to information. His interest includes writing, and he has written a book, Muyarchigalum Vetri, which deals with his experience handling consumer complaints.
Hello?
And his work in use.
Hello?
கேக்குது? பேசுங்க மேடம். நவநீதம்.
உங்களுக்கு கேக்குதுங்களா?
கேக்குது. இப்ப ஆரம்பிங்க, பேசலாம்.
சரி. என் பெயர் நவநீதம், மன்னூர்பேட்டை மகளிர் நுகர்வோர் உரிமை பாதுகாப்பு சங்க தலைவி. நான் கிட்டத்தட்ட ஒரு 25 வருஷமா இதுல இருக்கேன். இதுல கொஞ்சம் குறைகளா இருக்கு, நிறைகளும் இருக்கு. அதை நான் சொல்றேன். ஹலோ, கேக்குதுங்களா?
கேக்குது, பேசுங்க.
இப்ப பஸ் வந்து 10 பஸ் ஓடுற இடத்துல 5 பஸ் தான் ஓடுறது. அப்போ டிப்போ போய் பார்த்தா டிப்போல எவ்வளவு பஸ் அப்படி நின்றுட்டே இருக்கு. அப்ப நாங்க விசாரிச்சதுக்கு ரிட்டையர்ட் ஆனவங்களுக்கும் திருப்பி எடுக்கல ஆளை. அப்புறம் விஎஸ் வாங்கினவங்க இல்ல இறந்தவங்க அவங்களுக்கு பதில் ஆள் எடுக்கல. அதனால வந்து 300க்கு மேல பஸ் டிரைவருங்க ஷார்டேஜ். அதனாலதான் பஸ் நிக்குது. அந்த ஏரியாங்கள பஸ் வரலன்னு சொல்லிட்டு ஒரு குறை இருக்குது. அம்பத்தூர் எஸ்டேட்ல போயிட்டு நான் கேட்டதுக்கு ரொம்ப நாளாவே 24C வந்து திருவத்தூர் டு எஸ்டேட் அந்த பஸ் வரல ஏன்னு கேட்டதுக்கு அது பல நாளாவே நிப்பாட்டி வச்சுக்கிறாங்கம்மா, எல்லாத்துக்கும் காரணம் பஸ் ஷார்டேஜ் தான் அப்படின்னு சொன்னாங்க. இது இப்ப அந்த விஆர்எஸ் வாங்கினவங்க, இந்த ரிட்டையர்ட் ஆனவங்க, அவங்கள அந்த டிரைவருங்களை நீங்க நிரப்பினாதான் ஏரியாவுல வந்து நம்மளுக்கு நல்ல சௌரியமா போக முடியும். நிறைய பேர் பஸ்ல தான் போறாங்க. எவ்வளவு பேர்கிட்ட கார் இருக்கு, 2 வீலர் இருக்கு, பஸ்ஸையே நம்பி குடும்பம் பண்றவங்களே இருக்காங்க. பஸ் வந்து மஸ்ட், அத்தியாவசியமான ஒரு இது. அதனால அந்த டிரைவருங்களை நீங்க ஃபில்அப் பண்ணா 300க்கு மேல பஸ் போகும். 10 பஸ் போறதுல 5 பஸ் போகுது. அப்புறம் எப்படி அதை இது பண்ண முடியும்? அது ஒரு காரணம். ரெண்டாவது, மீட்டிங்ல கம்ப்ளைண்ட் பண்ண மாட்டாங்க. நான் வந்து இப்ப நான் சொல்றது எல்லாமே பல்லவன் ஹவுஸ்ல நாங்க மீட்டிங்கு போய் ஏற்கனவே சொல்லப்பட்ட விஷயங்க இது எல்லாமே. அதனால அவங்களுக்கும் தெரியும் நான் சொல்றது. இப்ப நாங்க மீட்டிங்கு போனா ஒரு வாரத்துக்குள்ள நாங்க கம்ப்ளைண்ட் பண்ணதை பூர்த்தி பண்றாங்க. ஒரு சின்ன சின்ன விஷயமா இருந்தா டக்குன்னு பூர்த்தி பண்ணிடுறாங்க. அதுக்கு ரிட்டனும் அனுப்புறாங்க. நாங்க என்ன பூர்த்தி பண்ணினோம், எந்த மாதிரி பண்ணிருக்கோன்னு சொல்லிட்டு எங்களுக்கு ரிட்டனா வந்து யார் யாருன்னா பேசினாங்க, அவங்க கிட்ட யார் எந்த அதிகாரி பேசினாங்க, அது எல்லாத்தையுமே எங்களுக்கு ரிட்டன்ல அனுப்புறாங்க. இப்ப எப்படின்னா நாங்க வந்து ஜேஇஐ அவங்களெல்லாம் பார்க்கல எங்க மீட்டிங்ல. அவங்களும் வராங்க. டைரக்டா எம்டி கூட தான் மீட்டிங் எங்களுக்கு பல்லவன் ஹவுஸ்ல எம்டி கூட மீட்டிங் போடுறதுனால டக்குன்னு எங்களுக்கு வேலை முடியுது. இப்ப வேற கீழ் மட்டத்துல இருக்கிறவங்க கிட்ட கொடுத்தா 1 வாரம் 10 நாள் கூட ஆகும் எம்டி கிட்ட சேர்றதுக்கு. ஸோ அது வந்து ஏதாவது வேலை இருந்தா அது கூட நின்று போயிடும். நாங்க டைரக்டா எம்டி கூட போயிட்டு நாங்க சொல்றதுனால பேசுறதுனால டக்குன்னு வேலை முடியுது. சின்ன சின்ன வேலைன்னா டக்குன்னு முடிச்சு கொடுத்துருவாங்க. 1 வாரத்துல முடிச்சிட்டோன்ற தகவலும் எங்களுக்கு ரிட்டர்ன் அனுப்புவாங்க. அந்த மாதிரி நடந்துட்டு இருக்கு. அதுக்கு நம்ம பல்லவன் ஹவுஸுக்கு நன்றி. அப்புறம் அண்ணா நகர் பகுதியில வந்து ஒரு வயதான அம்மா வந்து பஸ்ல ஏறினாங்க. பஸ்ல ஏறின பிறகு காலை தான் வச்சாங்க. 70 வயசு இருக்கும் அவங்களுக்கு. 70 காலை வச்சாங்க. அதுக்குள்ள வந்து கண்டக்டர் விசில் கொடுத்துட்டாரு. இதை டிரைவர் நோட் பண்ணிக்கிறாரு அந்த அம்மா ஏறலன்றத. அதுக்கப்புறம் ஏறி அவங்க உள்ள வந்த பிறகு அதுக்கப்புறம் வந்து கேட்கறேன், ஏன்பா டிரைவர் வந்து என்ன பாக்கலன்னா இந்நேரம் பின்பக்கம் அப்படியே வெள்ள கடிச்சு விழுந்திருப்பேன், விழுந்தா என் கெதி என்ன இருக்கும் டிரைவர் பாக்கலன்னா அப்படின்னு சொல்லிட்டு அந்த அம்மா கேக்குறாங்க. அவருக்கு வந்து அது வல்கரா பேசுறாரு அந்த கண்டக்டர். வேற மாதிரி நான் உங்க அப்பா விட்டு வண்டி அப்படின்னு ஒரு மாதிரி 2 பேரும் வாக்குவாதம் பேசிட்டே இருக்காங்க. அப்புறம் நான் எங்களுக்கு வந்து நம்பர் கொடுத்துருக்காங்க பல்லவன் ஹவுஸ்ல, ஏதாவது பிரச்சனைனா உடனே கால் பண்ணி சொல்லுங்கன்னு. அந்த நம்பருக்கு நான் கால் பண்ணினேன். அவங்க என்ன சொன்னாங்கன்னா, டிரைவருக்கு பக்கத்துல மேல நம்பர் இருக்கும், கோட் நம்பர், அந்த பஸ் நம்பர்லாம் இருக்கும், அதை நீங்க எங்களுக்கு நோட் பண்ணி சொல்லுங்க. நாங்க அதே மாதிரி சொன்னேன். அன்னைக்கு சாயந்தரமே வந்து அந்த ரிட்டர்ன் பதில் சொன்னாங்க, மேடம் நாங்க அவங்களை கூப்பிட்டோம் கண்டிச்சோம் அப்படின்னு சொல்லிட்டு. அதுக்கப்புறம் இன்னொரு வயசான அம்மா வந்து இன்னொன்னு இது கோயம்பேடு மார்க்கெட் வந்து மாத்திட்டதுனால பாரிஸுக்கு போற பஸ் எல்லாம் நிறைய கட் பண்ணிட்டாங்க. ஏன்னா மார்க்கெட்டை மாத்திட்டதுனால ஐநாவர ரூட்ல பஸ்ஸே இல்லாம இருந்தது. 248 தான் கவர் ஆகும் ஐநாவரைக்கும். ஐநாவரத்துக்கு அப்புறம் டிப்போ இருக்கு, அதுல வந்து போவோம். இங்க அம்பத்தூர்ல இருந்து போறது வந்து 248 தான். போனா எல்லா ஏரியாவும் அந்த ஐநாவர ரூட்டை கவர் ஆகும். வில்லிவாக்கம் ஐநாவரம் அப்படி. அது வந்து 2 ஹவருக்கு ஒரு பஸ், 1 ஹவருக்கு பஸ்ஸே வராது. இது ரொம்ப நாளா பிரச்சனை இருந்தது. நான் போயிட்டு பல்லவன் ஹவுஸ் மீட்டிங்ல சொன்னேன். அப்புறம் இப்போ வந்து நான் பஸ் விட்டுருக்காங்க. காலவருக்கு பஸ் வருது, அரைவருக்கு பஸ், பின்னாலே லைனா வருது 248 பஸ். அதுக்கு அவங்களுக்கு நன்றி. அடுத்தது அப்புறம் வயது ரொம்ப வயசானவங்க 70 வயசானவங்க கனரா பேங்க்ல இருந்து எஸ்டேட்டுக்கு வர்றதுக்கு 10 ரூபாய் கொடுத்துருக்காங்க 5 ரூபாய் டிக்கெட்டுக்கு. அதுக்கு இதையே நான் பல்லவன் ஹவுஸ்ல மீட்டிங்ல சொல்லியிருக்கேன். அதுக்கு 5 ரூபாய் அந்த கூடியிலன்னா இறங்குன்னு சொல்லிட்டு அந்த 5 ரூபாய் சில்லறை எல்லாமே இறக்கி விட்டுருக்காரு அவரு. அது வந்து ரொம்ப தவறானது. அப்புறம் ரொம்ப நாளா எங்க ஏரியால வந்து பஸ் உள்ள வர்றது, நான் வந்து ஞானமூர்த்தி நகர்ல இருக்கிறோம், நிறைய பேர் நான் பல்லவன் ஹவுஸ் மீட்டிங் போறதுனால என்கிட்ட கம்ப்ளைண்ட் பண்ணுவாங்க. அந்த மாதிரி இருக்கும்போது நான் மீட்டிங்ல சொல்லி மினி பஸ் விட்டாங்க. 77H 77K மினி பஸ் S58 போறதுக்கு 2 பஸ், வரதுக்கு 2 பஸ் மினி பஸ் விட்டாங்க. பெரிய பஸ் 2 விட்டுருந்தாங்க. அப்புறம் 77K வந்து கலெக்ஷன் இல்லைன்னு அந்த பக்கம் கள்ளிக்குப்பம் பக்கம் திருப்பி விட்டாங்க. 77H வந்துட்டு இருந்தது, அதையும் கட் பண்ணிட்டாங்க. அப்புறம் இந்த மினி பஸ் 4 பஸ்ல ஒரே ஒரு பஸ் தான் வருது. 2 மணிக்கு ஒரு நேரம் ஒரே பஸ் எஸ்டேட்ல இருந்து திருமலவாயில் போகுது, திருமலவாயில இருந்து எஸ்டேட்டுக்கு வருது. அப்போ 6 பஸ் போயிருந்தது, 4 பஸ் போயிருந்தது. சுத்தமா ஒரு பஸ் விட்டா அது எப்படி சார் அது கவர் ஆகும்? அது எவ்வளவு கஷ்டம். அதுக்கப்புறம் அதே நீங்க பார்த்து அந்த பஸ் ஒரு போறதுக்கு 2 வரதுக்கு 2 மினி பஸ்ஸாவது விடணும், பெரிய பஸ் விடலன்னா கூட. அதுக்கப்புறம் மகளிர் ஸ்பெஷல் விடுறீங்கல்ல, அது மாதிரி குழந்தைங்களுக்கு வந்து அந்த ஸ்கூல் விடுற நேரத்துல வில்லிவாக்கத்துல இருந்து ஆவடி வரைக்கும் ஒரு 1000 ஸ்கூல் இருக்கும். ஸ்கூலு 1000 ஸ்கூலு, சின்ன ஸ்கூலு எல்லாமே. அந்த நேரத்துல ஸ்கூலுங்க பஸ்ல குழந்தைங்க அந்த பேக் தூக்கிட்டு ஏறுது பாருங்க, அந்த பேக் டச் ஆகியே பெரியவங்களும் விழுந்துடுறாங்க, இல்ல இதுங்களே விழுந்துருதுங்க, இல்ல பஸ் விழுந்துருது. அந்த ரொம்ப கஷ்டப்படுறாங்க. இதை நான் சொல்லியிருக்கேன். அது அந்த 1 மணி நேரம் போறதுக்கு வரதுக்கு 2 பஸ், போறதுக்கு 2 பஸ் நீங்க விட்டீங்கன்னா எல்லாமே கவர் ஆயிடும். சில்ட்ரன்ஸ் ஸ்பெஷல், அதாவது பள்ளிக்கூட மாணவர்கள் பஸ்ன்னு விட்டீங்கன்னா, மகளிர் ஸ்பெஷல் மாதிரி இது விட்டீங்கன்னா அந்த குழந்தைங்க சேஃபா இருக்கும். எத்தனை குழந்தை அடிப்படுது, எத்தனை குழந்தை நான் ஹாஸ்பிட்டல் கூப்பிட்டு போயிருக்கேன் நான் பார்த்து. அதை வந்து நான் சொல்லியிருக்கேன், நான் பாக்குறேம்மான்னு சொல்லியிருக்காங்க. அப்புறம் வந்து அந்த முதியோர் பாஸ் கொடுத்துருக்காங்க, அது ரொம்ப மகிழ்ச்சி. அதுக்கப்புறம் 50 ரூபாய் டிக்கெட்டு, 1000 ரூபாய் டிக்கெட்டு கொடுத்துருக்காங்க, அதுவும் ரொம்ப ரொம்ப மகிழ்ச்சி நம்மளுக்கு எனக்கு. அதுக்கப்புறம் இங்க லாஸ்டா லாக்டவுனுக்கு முன்னாடி 16ஆம் தேதி பாஸ் இது 1000 ரூபாய் பாஸ் எடுத்திருக்காங்க. அது வந்து ஒரே ஒரு 6 நாள் தான் அது டிராவல் பண்ணிருக்காங்க. மார்ச் 16ஆம் தேதியில இருந்து ஏப்ரல் 15 வரைக்கும் அந்த பாஸ் ஒரே ஒரு வாரம் தான் அதுல டிராவல் பண்ணியிருக்காங்க. இப்போ அதை வந்து இந்த லாக்டவுன்லாம் முடிஞ்ச பிறகு அதை கொடுப்பாங்களா இல்ல கொடுக்க மாட்டாங்களா இல்ல முடிஞ்சிச்சுன்னு சொல்லுவாங்களான்னு தெரியல. அதையும் தெரிஞ்சுக்கணும் நாங்க. ஹலோ, கேக்குதுங்களா?
கேக்குது கேக்குது.
அதுக்கப்புறம் வந்து அதான் நிறைய இந்த மாதிரி வந்து எங்களுக்கு மீட்டிங் 3 மாசத்துக்கு ஒரு முறை பல்லவன் ஹவுஸ்ல மீட்டிங் போறதுனால எல்லாத்தையுமே ஒரு அளவுக்கு நாங்க அங்க கவர் பண்ணிடுறோம். அவங்களும் டக்குன்னு செய்யறாங்க. இது காரணமே எம்டி கூட எங்களுக்கு மீட்டிங் வர்றதுனாலதான். அதனால வந்து நான் ரொம்ப நேரம் எடுத்துக்க விரும்பல. இன்னும் நிறைய பேர் இருப்பாங்களே பேசுறதுக்கு.
ஓகே, ரொம்ப தேங்க்ஸ் மேடம்.
இல்ல இவ்வளவுதான் குறிப்பா நான் சொல்லிட்டேன். ஏன்னா நிறைய பேசினாலும் அடுத்து பேச இருக்காங்கல்ல. முக்கியமான பாயிண்ட் நான் சொல்லிட்டேன். ரொம்ப நன்றி.
ரொம்ப தேங்க்ஸ் மேடம். ரொம்ப தேங்க்ஸ் மேடம். நவ் ஐ ரிக்வெஸ்ட் Mr. Srinivasan sir. He is Secretary, Executive Secretary, Consumer Protection Force, Chennai. As I introduced Mr. Srinivasan sir, can you please share your thoughts, sir?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Our friend Shananda Krishna gave an excellent speech and covered. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
Excellent speech and covered many of the requisite subject commuters. I will touch only some 6 or 7 points. In 10 minutes, I will close. The main reason for the bus flooring and the discomfort to the passengers are the bus body code AAS 052 was not followed by the transport corporations for many decades. According to the wind and fancies, they are building the body. That is the main reason for all the discomforts. So our consumer organizations first insist whether they have renew or not. It is immaterial. They have to follow the bus body code AS 052. If they follow this code, 90% of the inconvenience to the commuters will be eliminated. Our friend from the association, we express his shock and everything. And Mr. Kalyan Raman, I think, the difficulties what he faced, he expressed everything. These difficulties will also be eliminated if the body code is maintained. It includes, the body code itself includes the flooring, how to fix the flooring, everything. So I don't want to go deep into the subject because of the time constraint. We simply say the bus body code AS0 automotive industry standard 052 must be followed. Otherwise, you need not to conduct bus transport. Then my second point, the GPS system already introduced in buses, but they use only for their traffic management. It is not extended to the passengers. So it is the need of the hour. They have to connect GPS system by which everyone will know when the bus will arrive to the stop, where the bus is there, everything. But I think they have promised in February something, due to COVID, that's not implemented so far. We have to speed up this issue also. My third point is, they have to give daily, weekly, monthly passes. Previously, there is a daily pass. There is something 50 rupees like that. Everyone has to travel. Even they can issue for 100 rupees. Now, they have stopped some 2 years back, the scheme. It is a welcome one for the passengers for the past 5 or 6 years. They suddenly stopped at the best reasons known to them only. So it must be implemented, daily passes. You may raise the amount. For 50, you can collect 60. Weekly passes, monthly passes also to be provided. The fourth point is the last mile connectivity. That is for the EMU stations and for metro stations. People are coming to the stations by 10:30, 11, 11:15, etc. From there, there is no bus service. They are winding up by 10 o'clock, or even now they are winding up by 9:30 itself. Gone are the days. We can believe the bus will come after 10:30, 11 o'clock like that. But they are now winding up at 9:30 something. So the last mile connectivity to all the metro rail and the EMU stations is the need of the hour. So this must be speeded up. Fifth point,
Hello, sir. Sumana, can you hear him? I am not able to.
No, I can't hear him. Sir, I think his internet seems to have broken off because it's frozen. Okay, let's go ahead. If is he able to rejoin, then we can see if he has further points to make. Harish?
Sir?
Okay, he's rejoining. He's able to.
Yeah.
hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Oh, sorry for the trouble. I lost the
No
connectivity.
Problem. Okay, okay, sir.
That clear
sir,
instructions.
Yes, sir.
Can I
You can
speak now?
continue, sir. Yeah, yeah, yes.
Clear instruction must be written inside the bus. That is prohibiting free travel to police personnel, because though many court orders and circulars are issued, but this menace was not stopped. Bona fide passengers has to stand while the trespassers are comfortably performing the journey, unmindful of the senior citizens, women and children who stood next to him. So this must be stopped. Clearly, instructions must be pasted inside the bus. Police personnel don't have any exemption. So this must be pasted inside the bus. There are a lot of trouble because of the police personnel. The crews are indifferent to their attitude. And even the ticket checking people comes inside the bus, they won't ask any question. So this must be already court decrees are there. Now my sixth point is strict adherence of sitting 48 passengers and standees 25. Totally 73 must be followed. Then my seventh point is every bus must be insured for third party insurance, because many buses are impounded for not paying the compensation decreed by the courts. Because of that, passengers lost their due quota of shares. They are indifferent. The management, they won't take the bus because the buses are age-old buses. They least care about it. They simply rusted inside the courts. So third-party insurance is must for each and every bus. Even if need be for passengers also, the bus transport can collect an insurance amount and give the adequate compensation legitimately to the passengers. Don't push them to go to pillar to post to get the compensation. If for any injury or any fatal accidents, those who are traveling inside the bus are also eligible, like the flights. So this must be made. They can decide later, but the third party, without third party insurance, no bus can be permitted to run on the road. This is my humble request. You please represent it. Then eighth point is ticket issued to passengers must clearly printed from which place he is traveling. That is a destination point must be mentioned clearly in the ticket. Now they are programmed in such a way only some 10 stages or 10 stop is there. They print only like that. It is against the commuter's interest. It is illegitimate. because where I can alight, where the destination is, must be printed. No compromise on it. But they are saying that this is the stage you can get down. There is a dispute between the passengers in the bus while traveling that this bus will not stop. So I gave this ticket. So the quarrel will arise inside the bus. So legal point of view also it is not correct. Person, it must be mentioned where he is actually alighting. The stop must be mentioned in the ticket. So you take this issue also. Inside the bus, unnecessary advertisement booths are there, but the useful informations are lagging. So the bus names of the stoppings and the fares must be displayed inside the bus. And also our friend Kalyan Raman also mentioned some braille stickers. It's all highly necessary. These things must be provided inside the bus. But unnecessarily, they are mentioning again and again, thieves, beware of thieves, like that. See, we know that we are always aware of this, not only that. Okay. So, inside the bus, only one point, please add to me.
Okay. Yeah.
From March, only one point, I will complete it. Okay. From March 16 to April this year, 1,000 rupee passes are bought by the commuters. The transport department, especially the MTC, maintaining a stonic silence. It is illegitimate. See, they have collected crores together of rupees, but for the past 4 months, they have not operated the bus. They have to refund the amount. See, optional, commuters say, you cannot give the option. Commuters have the right to give the option. You must in a position to refund the amount. Many of them migrated or gone out of the city. Oh, how can you say like, say we will adjust or something like that? So far they have not committed anything. They are having PROs, press communiques, so many things, but they have not reacted. Why they are maintaining the stonic silence? Improperly, they are holding the amount. My friend, Mr. M.K. Parsalda mentioned it. So you please take an urgent measure in this to refund the amount. See, they can give the option. If anybody wants to adjust in future travel, they can manage. But it is foremost requirement to refund the amount. You have no right to hold the money. Okay, thank you very much for peacefully having this.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, sir. Thank you,
Yes,
sir.
sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Srinivasan, sir, for giving us some practical inputs like improving the bus body design and improving the GPS system of buses so that it could also help passengers and not just the MTC staff, and for many other inputs. Thank you, sir. And now I request Mr. Varadan. Varadan, sir, he is Secretary, Punamalli North Consumer Rights Protection Center. He has worked in the field of consumer protection for the last 25 years. He is a member of the State Food Safety Committee, and he is one of the 6 members representing consumers on the committee to revise auto fare charges in Chennai. He takes particular interest in ensuring MTC buses are available in locations, especially in outer Chennai. His organization has been working in Tiruvallur district for the past 15 years. Now I request Varadan sir, could you please share your thoughts?
Yes. கேக்குதுங்களா?
கேக்குது சார்.
ஓகே சார். ஓகே. வணக்கம். நாங்க நீங்க சொன்ன மாதிரி திருவள்ளூர் மாவட்டத்துல கிராமப்புற பகுதியில கடந்த 25 வருஷமா சர்வீஸ் பண்ணிட்டு இருக்கோம். குறிப்பாக எங்க பகுதி மக்களுக்கு ஏற்ற மாதிரியான விஷயங்கள்ல நாங்க அதிகமாக கவனம் செலுத்துறோம். இதுக்கு முன்னதாக நுகர்வோர் அமைப்பாக பதிவு பண்ணுவதற்கு முன்னாடியே குறிப்பாக பல்லவன் போக்குவரத்து கழகம், அம்பேத்கர் போக்குவரத்து கழகம் என்ற பெயர்ல இந்த போக்குவரத்து கழகங்கள் இயங்கிய போது ஒரு தனி அமைப்பாக ஒரு பொதுநல அமைப்பாக இருந்த போது கூட நாங்க அவங்களுக்கு மனுக்களை ஆலோசனைகளை புகார்களை அனுப்பியிருக்கோம். உடனுக்கு உடன் பதில் கிடைக்கும். ஆனா இன்றைக்கு நாங்க நுகர்வோர் அமைப்பாக, குறிப்பாக தன்னார்வ நுகர்வோர் அமைப்பாக எங்களை பதிவு செய்து கொண்டு இவங்க மாநகர் போக்குவரத்து கழகத்துடைய தன்னார்வ நுகர்வோர் அமைப்பினுடைய பட்டியலில் இடம்பெற்று 3 மாசங்களுக்கு ஒரு முறை கலந்துக்கிறோம். தொடக்கத்துல எங்களுக்கு நிறைய ஆர்வம் இருக்குது. இப்போ கலந்துக்கும் போது பார்த்தா எங்களுடைய கோரிக்கைகள் 3 அல்லது 4, 5 கோரிக்கைகள் கொண்டு போனாலும் பரிசீலிக்கப்படும், ஆய்வு செய்யறோம் அப்படின்னு தான் சொல்றாங்க. பெரும்பாலான கோரிக்கைகள் இதுவரையில நிறைவேற்றப்படலை. அதுல இன்னும் குறிப்பா சொல்லணும்னா ஒரு சிறு பேருந்து மினி பஸ் கேட்கிறோம். அது எங்க பூந்தமல்லிக்கும் தண்டுரைக்கும் இயக்கப்படுகின்ற ஒரு தடத்துல இருக்கிற ஒரு இடம். அணைக்கேட்டேரி என்ற பகுதி, சோராஞ்சேரி என்ற பகுதியில அரசு ஆரம்ப சுகாதார நிலையம் இருக்கிறது. 10 ஆண்டுகளாக செயல்பட்டு வருகிறது. இந்த மாவட்டத்திலேயே ஒரு சிறப்பான பெயர் பெற்ற ஒரு நிலையம். அது குறிப்பாக மகப்பேறு விஷயத்தை இன்றைக்கு 700க்கும் மேற்பட்ட சுகப்பிரசவங்களை செய்து முடித்ததன் காரணமாக தமிழ்நாடு அரசனுடைய சுகாதாரத்துறை அமைச்சரோட அவார்டு வாங்கியிருக்கு. மாவட்ட ஆட்சித்தலைவராலும் அந்த டாக்டர்களுக்கு அந்த அவார்டு கிடைச்சிருக்கு. அது போல ரொம்ப சிறப்பாக கொண்டு போறாங்க. ஆனால் இந்த சிறப்பு மிகுந்த சேவை செய்கின்ற அந்த பிரைமரி ஹெல்த் சென்டர்ல இந்த பகுதியை சேர்ந்த ஒரு 10-15 கிராமங்களுக்கு மேற்பட்ட மக்கள் போய் அந்த சேவையை கொஞ்சம் பெற்றுக்கொள்வதற்கு, பயன்படுத்திக் கொள்வதற்கு போக்குவரத்து வசதி இந்த பகுதியில சரியா இல்லை. குறிப்பாக அந்த தடத்துல ஆட்டோ கிடையாது. அரசனுடைய மாநகர் போக்குவரத்து கழகத்துடைய பஸ் ஒண்ணு போகுது 53S. அது அதனுடைய ஆப்ரேஷன் டைம் வந்து குறிப்பாக, ஏன்னா அது ஒரு முறை போச்சானா அதோட திருவேற்காடுல இருந்து அதனுடைய ட்ரிப்ஸை வந்து மாத்திடுது, வேறு வேறு இதுகள்ல போயிட்டு. அதனால முழுமையா அந்த பேருந்து இல்லாதனால இவங்களுக்கு பயன்படுத்திக்க முடியல. இன்னும் தெளிவா சொல்லணும்னா அங்க போகின்ற ஆண் பெண் குழந்தைகள் அத்தனை பேருமே அந்த வழியில போற இருசக்கர வாகனத்துல போறவங்கள, ஆட்டோல போறவங்க யாராவது போனாக்கா இவங்களதான் கெஞ்சி கூத்தாடி ஐயா அப்பா அம்மான்ட்டு போய் சேர்றாங்க, அல்லது நடந்தே போய் தான் சேர்றாங்க. திரும்பி வருகின்ற போதும் அதுதான் குறைக்க. ஒரு சிலர் மட்டும்தான் இருசக்கர வாகனம் வச்சிருக்கங்க, அவங்க குடும்பத்தோட மனைவியை, மகளை, குழந்தைகளை கூட்டின்னு வராங்க. அதனால இந்த ஒரு பயன்பாட்டுக்கு கூட அரசினுடைய நிறுவனமான ஆரம்ப சுகாதார நிலையத்தில் பயன்பாட்டை பெற்றுக்கொள்வதற்கு அரசனுடைய ஒரு நிறுவனமான மாநகர போக்குவரத்து கழகம் நாங்கள் ஏறக்குறைய 5 ஆண்டுகளுக்கு மேலாக கோரிக்கையாக வைத்து கொண்டிருக்கின்ற இந்த சிறு பேருந்தை இயக்குவதற்கு பார்வையிடுகிறோம், ஆய்வு செய்கிறோம். இந்த பதிலை தான் கொடுத்துட்டு இருக்காங்க. இதுதான் இப்படி இருக்கு அப்படின்ற மாவட்ட ஆய்வு போயிருக்கு. அப்போ ஒண்ணு இல்லை. குறிப்பாக நாங்க கேட்டிருக்க அந்த தடத்துல ஒரு வெறுமனே வெட்டிக்காக இந்த இடத்த மட்டுமே அது போக போறது இல்லை. ஒன்னும் ஏற்கனவே இருக்கிற அன்னம்பேடு என்ற பகுதியில தொடங்கலாம்னு கேட்கிறோம், அல்லது திருநெந்தூர் இந்த பகுதியில் தொடங்கி திருவேற்காடு வரையில இந்த வழியை டச் பண்ணி போனா அரசுக்கும் வருவாய், நிர்வாகத்துக்கு எங்களுக்கும் பலன் கிடைக்கும். ஏன்னா இந்த ரூட்ல வந்து குறைஞ்சபட்சம் 10க்கும் மேற்பட்ட அரசு துறை சார்ந்த அலுவலகங்கள் இருக்கின்றன. மின்துறை அலுவலகம், வருவாய் கோட்டாட்சியர் அலுவலகம், பிரைமரி அக்ரிகல்ச்சர் கோஆபரேட்டிவ் சொசைட்டிஸ், இது போன்ற பல்வேறு அலுவலகங்கள் இருக்கிறது. அதை மக்கள் பயன்படுத்திக் கொள்ள முடியும். இது மாதிரியான கோரிக்கை வச்சு இதுவரையில எங்களுக்கு அந்த கோரிக்கை எங்களுக்கு செவி மறுக்கப்படவில்லை என்பது ஒரு வருத்தமான நிகழ்வாக நான் இங்கே பதிவு செய்கின்றேன். அடுத்ததாக அந்த புகார் சொல்றதுக்காக இமெயில் ஐடி, கம்ப்ளைண்ட் நம்பர்ஸ் இருந்தால் கூட பல நேரங்களில் அது பலன் அளிக்காமல் தான் போய்விடுகிறது. அதனால இது போன்ற விஷயங்களில் வந்து மீண்டும் மாநகர போக்குவரத்து கழகம் இந்த கொரோனா ஊரடங்குக்கு பிறகு மீண்டும் அதனுடைய பணியை முழுமையாக துவக்க இருக்கின்ற நேரத்திலே எங்கள் குழுக்கள் எல்லாம் வைத்துக் கொண்டிருக்கின்ற, குறிப்பாக தன்னார்வ நுகர்வோராக எதிர்பார்த்து ஆவலுடன் சென்ற அந்த கூட்டங்களிலும் எங்கள் கோரிக்கைகள் நிறைவேற்றப்படவில்லை என்பது போன்ற ஆதங்கங்களை குறைப்பதற்கு, நிவர்த்தி செய்வதற்கு மாநகர போக்குவரத்து கழக நிர்வாகம் நடவடிக்கை மேற்கொள்ள வேண்டும். அதற்கு இந்த அமைப்பு எங்களுக்கு அதற்கான வழிவகை செய்து கொடுக்க வேண்டும் என்று கூறி வாய்ப்புக்கு நன்றி தெரிவித்துக் கொள்கிறேன். நன்றி சார்.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Varadan, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir, for giving us some valuable thoughts on issues concerning passengers in the peri-urban areas of Chennai. Thank you, sir. Now I request Mr. Vivek. He is pursuing his final year bachelor's in law from Dr. Ambedkar Government Law College, Chennai. He has been living in Chennai for the past 5 years and has used the MTC bus service regularly. He will share his thoughts from a student perspective. Vivek?
Hello.
Yeah.
Are you hear my voice, sir?
Yes.
எல்லாருக்கும் வணக்கம். நான் வந்து எம்டிசி பஸ்ல இருந்து ஒரு லாஸ்ட் 5 இயர்ஸா வந்து டிராவல் பண்ணிட்டு இருக்கேன். When I used to travel my MTC bus service, what are the issues I face? That experience I would like to share to you. Everybody says face the same issues. Already the speakers are already told the same issue also I have faced. That is crowded. Every time the bus was crowded, but the reason is the bus are limited in the cities. The reason only the crowd, the buses, and no safety measures inside the bus. If any issues affected the inside the bus, there are no safety measures. Then the MTC bus not maintained properly. That means the cleanness is not making in the buses. Then that reason only the people are not willing to use the MTC buses. Then nowadays the ticket cost also the most effective to compare to the share autos, and that reason the people are not willing to use the MTC buses. In metropolitan city, the bus has the white board, green board, and the deluxe. Nowadays the white board, green board was not enough. The deluxe bus are mostly in the cities. The ticket cost also very high. Though the people also, you think about what can I do, the ticket cost is more than 50 to 200 by taking the one travel that time. So the people are not willing to use the MTC service. So my point of view, my suggestion is the government to take care of the poor people, but the metropolitan city, the poor people also stay. So they take care of the people and make some schemes to the poor people to enjoy the benefit, and make a maintenance the bus so the people are willing to use. If not clean any place, we are not stay that place. No, that way at least 2 days once the bus clean is useful for the people, and make the cashless ticket is useful for people to take their travel with benefit. And the bus structure also is very not comfortable. The structure is too little, so the people are not able to use those. In bus structure, in middle or last, we have some space to stand. The stand space, the people easily to use their places. Then add the audio option too in buses. The people are easily to what stand the bus is now in, so they easily accessible to the options. Okay, that's my point of view. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vivek, for sharing the thoughts from a student perspective. Thank you very much. Now we have ended the discussion from the commuter perspective. All the speakers have spoken. Now I request Saroja to share her valuable thoughts.
Thanks, Harish. So, as a member of Sumnet, we are very happy to be running this campaign in Chennai. And I would like to thank Sanskriti and Sanskriti, Avinash, and the CE team for helping us out in organizing this webinar. They have been quite supportive, actually. Thank you very much, Sanskriti and team. And I would like to thank Mr. Ananthakrishnan and Mr. Sandeep Gandhi for joining us today sharing their thoughts and sharing their technical details, data that was shared by Mr. Gandhi was quite useful. And I would like to thank the commuters as well, Mr. Raghuram, Mr. Parthasarthi, Ms. Navanitam, Mr. Srinivasan, Mr. Bharathan, and Mr. Vivek. உங்க எல்லாருக்குமே நன்றி சார். இன்னைக்கு எங்களோட இந்த மீட்டிங்ல ஜாயின் பண்ணதுக்கு. ஆக்சுவலா கேட்ட மிஸ்டர் பாத்சார்த்தி வந்து ரொம்ப ரிலக்டண்டா இருந்தாரு பேசுறதுக்கு, ஜாயின் பண்றதுக்கு. பட் நான் வந்து ஹீஸ் அ சீனியர் சிட்டிசன். ஐம் ஷூர் ஹீஸ் 80+. ஸோ சார் வந்து அவரோட எக்ஸ்பீரியன்ஸ் ஷேர் பண்ணா நல்லா இருக்கும். ஏன்னா ஹி ஹஸ் பீன் அ கம்யூட்டர், பஸ் கம்யூட்டர் ஃபார் லைக் several decades now. 1950 இருந்து he has been using public transport buses. அதனால அவர் பேசினா நல்லா இருக்கும் அப்படின்னு சொல்லிட்டு I requested him personally and then he agreed to join. And எல்லாரும் நவநீதம் மேடம் and Mr. Srinivasan, Mr. Bharathan எல்லாருக்குமே வந்து ரொம்ப தேங்க்ஸ். And Vivek, thank you very much for joining us today. I wish you all the best. And yes, I would like to finally thank Sumana and Harish for putting this together. Thank you all very much.
Saroja, in case we need to have some discussion, do you think we could just continue for a few minutes? Because I think...
Sure. Oh, I thought since we had exceeded time...
We have exceeded the time.
Yeah.
But I think in case there's some...
Sure. Definitely. Then I think we'll leave the floor open for discussion for 10 minutes or so, and we will take a few questions. So நம்ம சார் இப்போ வந்து ஒரு 10 நிமிஷம் வந்து டிஸ்கஸ் பண்ணலாம். நம்ம இப்போ இது வரைக்கும் நம்ம பேசினதை வச்சு ஏதானும் பர்டிகுலரா ஏதானும் கொஸ்டின்ஸ் இருக்கு யாருக்கானும், இல்ல ஏதானும் அப்சர்வேஷன்ஸ் இருக்கு நீங்க வந்து சொல்லணும் அப்படின்னு நினைச்சீங்கன்னாக்க ப்ளீஸ் நீங்க யூ கேன் ஜஸ்ட் டெல், யூ கேன் ஸ்பீக்.
Vivek seems to have raised his hand. Vivek, உங்களுக்கு ஏதானோ ஆட் பண்ணனும்னு இருந்துச்சா?
மேம், பாடி ஸ்ட்ரக்சர், அதாவது பஸ்ஸோட பாடி ஸ்ட்ரக்சர் வந்து சேஞ்ச் பண்ணா கம்மிங் பஸ்ல வந்து கொஞ்சம் பெனிஃபிட்டா இருக்கும் பீப்புளுக்கு. ஹலோ,
ஓகே சொல்லுங்க
மேம். பாடி ஸ்ட்ரக்சர், அதாவது மிடில் இல்லனா எண்டில் வந்து கொஞ்சம் ஸ்பேஸ் விட்டா ஸ்டாண்டிங் பீப்புளுக்கு வந்து அது கொஞ்சம் யூஸ்ஃபுல்லா இருக்கும். அது ஒரு அதை ஆட் பண்ணலாம். அதே மாதிரி ஆடியோ ஆப்ஷன் வந்து பஸ்ல இருந்தா வந்து பீப்புளுக்கு அது வந்து கொஞ்சம் ஹெல்ப்ஃபுல்லா இருக்கும். அதே மாதிரி கேஷ்லெஸ் டிக்கெட் வந்து அந்த ஆப்ஷன் கொண்டு வந்தா ஈஸிலி டு மூவபிள், அக்சஸபிள் ஃபார் பீப்புள்.
ஓகே, தேங்க் யூ. எனிபடி எல்ஸ் வேற ஏதானோ யாருக்கானோ ஆட் பண்ணனும் இல்ல கேள்வி, கமெண்ட், எனிதிங்?
Yeah, I wanted to just, drawing on Sandeep's presentation, what I could understand is that if MTC invests or money is, provided or funds are provided to MTC, about 1,500 crores, then we are able to shift 40% of private motorized vehicles, traffic trips to public transport. Is that right, Sandeep?
It's 1,500 crores per year for the next 5 years.
Okay. And also wanted to understand from the, different CAG team and others, typically is 1,500 crores or thereabouts, is it quite difficult for Chennai Corporation and state government to spare for MTC compared to the investments they may be making in different other, provisions of private transportation. I mean, building flyovers or something in certain parts of the city, or road widening, etc. I mean, of course, road network is important, but if more money is spent in widening or building flyovers, so what kind of comparison, or could this be done in the future? To highlight that we are trying to cater more and more to private transport, but if we spend of the order of 1,500 crores, we will manage to get to 65% of mode share of public transport.
So from what we've seen, we actually don't know what the budget allocation is. So I think it again depends on priorities. So MTC Puerto Rico, they are, it doesn't come under the GCC per se. Their budget is separate. They're not, the corporation does not budget for new buses or any of that. So the question is, it has to be through the transport department, which decides these things. And we actually, as far as I know, have very little information on what their budgeting process is, or how much they're looking at, or how much they've actually even budgeted in the past few years. Maybe Ananthakrishnan sir, you might have some information from going back on their budgeting.
Yeah, actually, just before the pandemic struck, this whole idea of electric mobility, introducing electric buses, that took off in a big way. And actually, we do have commitments from the German government, through their agency to fund several hundred buses. So, in fact, those reports are out in the public domain about how they would fund that. So, I think raising 1,500 crores in today's conditions is not difficult through a variety of sources. And in any case, we can always make a pitch for climate funding. And in a big city like ours with pollution concern, in the normal case, we should be able to raise that money without much difficulty.
Yeah. So typically, Sandeep, do you have any idea of this shift? What will enable this shift to actual investments?
Well, I mean, an exercise that we did for Delhi, that points that that Delhi has been spending into the tune of between 4,000 to 5,000 crore, on transportation in the city. And majority of that has been going on building infrastructure such as flyovers and bridges and things like that. 90% of that is actually not required because it's basically poor geometry of the streets which is causing, even if you look at congestion for cars, it's mainly because of poor geometry of the streets. It has got nothing to do with flyovers. If they simply improve the junction geometry, they will, even if they are so concerned about congestion to cars, let's say, it has got, flyovers are not going to solve any of those problems. So 90% of that is not required. So, it's the wrong priorities basically, which is basically driving all these investments into the direction where it is not even required. So it can be easily redirected. But what is required for that to be achieved is for a long-term plan to be ready, pushed by the citizens and accepted by the government. And if that plan is there and it is a common plan and it is in the public domain, then basically citizens can go back to the government every year or every couple of months and ask them that this year you were supposed to buy so many buses, you were supposed to invest so many depots were to be developed, so many terminals were to be developed, so much land was to be made available. What all has been done? So instead of basically looking at very large, what you call numbers, saying we need 10,000 buses and nobody cares about 10,000 buses. If we just have some annual numbers, we're saying, okay, this year we need 2,000 buses. That's the end of it. So 2,000 is easily achievable. Spending, allocating 1,500 crores is easily achievable. And so basically, if you have this kind of an annual long-term plan, you can go back every year to the government, citizens group can sit with them and basically make them accountable or something like that.
Yeah, what I found most useful also, the correlation between the budget and the bus numbers and then the expected mode share shift. So if we can even make the argument on that basis, I think that would be quite a good way to proceed to.
Yep.
Would anybody else யாருக்கானோ ஏதானோ கேள்வி இல்ல வேற ஏதானோ points raise பண்ணோம் அப்படின்னு இருந்ததுன்னா floor is open for
க்ளோஸ் பண்ணியாச்சா?
almost sir. Just the last comments, if anybody has any comments to make, please do.
அதாவது இப்ப பஸ் ஓடும்போது மினி பஸ் இருக்கு, அதையும் சேர்த்து ஓட்டணும். அது விட்டு போச்சு.
ஓகே.
நார்மல் பஸ் ஓடும்போது மினி பஸ் ஓடிந்து அதையும் சேர்த்து விட்டணும் ஒரு ரிக்வெஸ்ட்.
ஆமா, லாஸ்ட் மைல் கனெக்டிவிட்டி. ஆமா
ஆமா, மினி பஸ் ரொம்ப உபயோகமா இருந்தது இது வரைக்கும். அது இப்ப ரொம்ப கட் பண்ணிட்டாங்க. மினி பஸ் மறுபடி ஓட ஆரம்பிக்கணும். எல்லா காலனிக்கும் உபயோகம் பண்றதுக்கு போயிட்டு இருக்கு. ஆட் பண்ணிக்கோங்க.
ஓகே.
That's all.
Okay, sir. Thank you. So he's saying that we have this thing called mini buses, which are going to the localities, sort of a last mile connectivity service, and those need to be restarted as well as they restart other bus services.
இதோட மினிட்ஸ் கிடைக்குமா காப்பீஸ்?
மினிட்ஸ் அனுப்புறோம் சார்.
அட்ரஸ் தெரியுமா?
இருக்கு சார், நோ வரிஸ், உங்களுக்கு அனுப்புறோம்.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I think the other thing that can be pushed here is that, I mean, what citizen groups like you can push for is to have to have enough capacity in the MTC to ensure that they can proactively undertake service planning and operations planning and review their operations every year and on a regular basis. So, I mean, typically, I mean, good organizations would use this data that they collect from tickets and through other secondary surveys and small surveys and things like that. Even commuter surveys, they use that data from all of that to understand where the demand has to be, where the demand is, where the buses need to be reallocated, replanned, routes constantly change all the time. Your schedules constantly change, they align to all these requirements. It's not happening with any of the STUs in India. Of course, that's not even happening with Chennai, but this is something that they can, I mean, you can demand for that. They start looking at, they have a kind of a protocol which looks at service and operation plans on a regular basis and makes them, puts them in public domain, not just the final outcome, but also the process or the data that they have been using to make that plans. I mean, so that will basically, that will solve a lot of these problems, last mile connectivity and access to a lot of localities which may have very scanty bus service or those kind of things.
Also, the policy perspective, I would like to just put up a couple of points. Now, the present central government, they are very clear that they want the private sector to be involved heavily in the expansion of all services. And I don't know what that implies for monopoly service like what exists in Chennai. So in the future, it's quite possible that you will not have access to major funding from central plans, whatever funding they are willing to give you. And the other aspect is that, the model in Tamil Nadu itself, I think, is still under consideration. So I think there has been this allegation that the government wants to, part privatize it and change the model to some kind of a purchased model, where they purchase services and operate it under a government, sort of overall framework. So I think these issues will, achieve some shape because this government is going to be there at the center for another, let's say, 4 years. So their idea is very defined. Niti Aayog is also pushing in that direction. So I think we will see some kind of, modification to the scheme as it exists today in Chennai and, possibly other places in Tamil Nadu. And then there is a smart cities program. So there you might be able to use some of those, funds for at least the ITS, intelligent transport systems, which the government can lead. And while they actually purchase provision, in terms of buses and crews, through some other model. So I think these are works in progress as I can see them. Thank you.
I have some information on that. See, the one of the model that is being looked at, and that's, has been explored earlier also, is that all these STUs basically, instead of they're currently working both as regulators and operators. So the idea is to basically dealing these functions. So the STU basically becomes one possibility is that each STU, let's say MTC, gets broken into 3 parts, and there is a regulator which really becomes really the planner of the services and things like that. Something that sets the fare and fixes the fare, fixes the routes, fixes the service schedules and things like that. The second part becomes the manager of all the infrastructure. So depots and terminals are managed by that part. And the third part really becomes an operator. And then this becomes only one of the operator, which is basically a government operator. Then they can be, apart from this operator, they can be private operators. But then all of those operators, including this government operator, are managed together by this first party, which is the regulator. Who sets the fare and plans the routes and things like that. And then all of these operators also go for services like servicing their buses and accessing the bus terminal. They go to the second party, which is managing the bus terminal and the depots. And so basically it becomes a level playing field between the government and the private. But it will not reduce the funds requirement from the government side in any ways, because even when the private operators come, there is this gap between what the commuters can pay and what is required to run the bus service, and that will remain for the foreseeable future in the cities at least. So that gap will have to be bridged by the government, both for the private and the government operators. So even if the private operator bids for a route, they may bid at a price which is, let's say, 40 rupees a kilometer, and the government collects the revenue from a third party on those routes. That revenue will be, let's say, 32 rupees a kilometer. That 8 rupees gap per kilometer will have to be paid for by the government. Just that it becomes a more formal arrangement where it is a service that is paid for by the government, as against now where basically it is seen as a loss. It will become a service that is purchased by the government for the people, provided and purchased by the government. So that just becomes more formalized and standardized, which is good, but it will not reduce the cost or requirement or commitment from the government side. So this money can be expected, budgetary requirement can be expected still.
Yeah, and the point that we are also trying to make, I guess, is that to keep the economy working, to get these 60-70% people who actually both the actual commuters as well as the latent demand for bus travel, that these are the workers, work trips, etc., which keep the city moving actually and provide for the economic activity of the city. And so these are connected, and so the grant from the government would need to be there in any case. And I understand the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways is putting together this bus rejuvenation scheme. We don't know, because this was a discussion pre-COVID. What is the shape of that discussion in the current system? But I think the dialogue that we had today seeks to also underline that, if a scheme like the National Bus Rejuvenation Scheme, which is looking to professionalize bus transport systems and also provide viability gap funding, these are actually necessary, and we should participate in those dialogues so that the schemes that are developed are in fact fair schemes and work for the commuter. So I think many of the points made really underscore the need for good public transport for people to get to education and work, and also the broader aspects of how much money does it take to get a good bus system, and what does it contribute in terms of improved air quality and improved road safety. Because if we see a 40% shift to public transport, we would see a greater environmental and social benefit, quite apart from the benefits of the public transport system itself.
Anyone else want to add anything, or are we?
We could close, otherwise.
We could close, yeah. So thank you everyone again, as Saroja said, because it's gone quite over time. And we also hope to continue working with everyone on this issue. I know that everybody believes in the bus system a lot, and we know that it's important. So we hope to work with everyone who has joined us today to take this forward further, and hopefully see better and improved MTC and in other cities as well. But definitely for us in Chennai, we hope we will see an improved service which takes into consideration all the needs of all the different kinds of commuters who exist, and that we'll have a more sustainable and livable city in the future. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us today.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.